This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I ask everyone to make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions? That includes the little buzz mode, which is a bit unhelpful. So can I now ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies have been received.
Great. OK, so before we get to our main item this morning, which is looking at delivery of the Mayor's Manifesto, we have a couple of bits of housekeeping. So firstly, declaration of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Noted. Good. Quick you say that, the quicker we can move through all this bit. Item 3, minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meetings held on the 22nd of July and the 23rd of July 2025? Good, excellent. Item 4, can I ask the committee to note the ongoing and completed actions arising from its previous meetings? Noted. Good. Item 5, can I ask the committee to note the response from the Mayor of London on climate budgeting and green finance as attached at Appendix 1? Noted. Good. That brings us to our main item this morning, which is tracking delivery of the Mayor's 2024 manifesto commitments. So if I could welcome our panel this morning, we have Faye Hammond, who is the Chief Finance Officer of the GLA. Morning, Faye. We have Richard Watts, who is the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff. Morning, Richard. And we have Jamila Hines-Brough, who is the Mayoral Head of Delivery. Good morning, Jamila. So if I kick off with the first question to you, Richard. So how satisfied is the Mayor to date with delivery of his 2024 manifesto by the GLA and the functional bodies? Morning, Chair. Ooh, don't forget to switch your mic on.
I've done this enough, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. So good morning, everyone. And I'm surprised after your advert for this session last night, Neil, that there's not. Maybe the queue hasn't quite got through security yet. Good to see everyone. So we sent the committee a list of the Mayor's manifesto, numbered list of the Mayor's manifesto commitments, which are 146 in total. Of those, 20 are already complete. The vast majority of the rest are comfortably on track for completion. I've no doubt we'll get on to the one we think is not on track for completion, and some others we think are, a small number of others we think are going to be more. We are not wholly confident yet will be complete, but no doubt we'll get into all of that. But straight answer to your question, given where we are, given the financial circumstances we find ourselves in, we are very satisfied with how it's going.
So I've done the mic thing now as well. OK, thank you, Richard. You're right, we'll come on to all the various sections as we go through the meeting. Jamila, if I can ask you, how are you monitoring progress and reporting on progress against the manifesto commitments?
Morning. Sure. So the new strategic programmes for the GLA are really the key mechanism for monitoring progress of the Mayor's manifesto commitments. I know that you've recently discussed this with kind of Richard and Faye separately, but so you'll know that those strategic programmes are progressing well. They are in development. They are not all completed yet in terms of published delivery plans, but as you would expect, the work to develop those is very much ongoing. All of the Mayor's manifesto commitments are reflected across that suite of strategic programmes, and the delivery plans associated with them have very clear sets of measures of success and metrics for monitoring delivery. So moving forward, really, that is the key mechanism for monitoring delivery of the manifesto. Now, as I said, obviously all of those are not published yet. I think that we have 8 now complete of the 14 GLA-led programmes, and then there's a further sort of 7 to go that are led by other members of the GLA group. In that interim, whilst those programmes are still being, whilst those delivery plans, are still in the process of being finalised, as you'd expect, I have kind of regular engagement with the SROs of those programmes.
Apologies, a couple of members of the committee said they couldn't quite hear you very clearly. I don't know if you can either bend your mic down a bit so it's aiming sort of at your mouth.
Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you very much.
Apologies. What I was saying is essentially that the GLA strategic programmes and their associated delivery plans are the key mechanism for monitoring delivery, and all of the Mayor's manifesto commitments are reflected throughout those programmes. But what I was getting on to say is that, as we'll all know, those programmes and their associated delivery plans aren't all yet published and finalised. So in that interim, whilst that work is still ongoing and being developed, I and my team have regular discussions with the SROs of those programmes and their teams. And it's through that kind of regular engagement and actually in the transparency and accountability that having that clear SRO for each programme brings that I'm able to monitor delivery of those commitments alongside working very closely with the deputy mayors and their teams as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And that information is published, is it, the tracking?
Well, I have my own sort of informal notes through conversations with SROs and with deputy mayors. The information that's published is the delivery plan, and then of course there'll be quarterly monitoring. As you would expect, the kind of the Q1, Q2, etc. reports that will be. I'm sure Faye can speak more to the progress of those. That's all published as you'd expect, and then beyond that, it's kind of informal, regular conversations between myself, members of my team, and the SROs and deputy mayors.
Okay. Faye, my final opening question. To what extent do you consider that the published 2025-26 budget, including the financial plans through to the end of 27-28, to what extent do they fully fund the commitments made in the Mayor's manifesto?
So within the GLA budget, we've specifically set out for each of those delivery plans back in February, March time, the 3-year budget. So in terms of that, I'm satisfied that we've got sufficient resources to deliver the delivery plans through that process. We've allocated those funds.
So it's all costed in the budget.
It's all costed in the GLA's budget. I think for some of the more wider ones, some of those will be developed perhaps over the year in terms of talking about TfL, for example, police, etc. Some of those will form part of the budget process as we come up for the new year, because of course it's a 4-year term. So at different point, we're at different, as long as those commitments are delivered over the 4-year term, it might be that those budget commitments are evolving over that time.
And I think it's worth just adding to that, Chair, that the manifesto, albeit wasn't written by GLA officers, was written by the London Labour Party, just to be clear, made very clear that some commitments in it would be subject to receiving external funding. And I don't doubt we'll go through that, but obviously Faye can only control what she can control as Chief Financial Officer about GLA funds. Some of this, as we'll come into, no doubt, is still dependent on receipt of external funding.
Okay, I'm sure you're right, but we'll come on to that shortly. So we actually now move on to our first sort of substantive section under the Mayor's heading of making London fairer. We start with Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair, and good to see you all. So wanted to start with housing, clearly the biggest issue facing Londoners at the moment. We've got a very ambitious target of achieving 40,000 affordable homes, or new council homes, so socially affordable by the end of the decade. Do you consider that commitment is going to be on track?
Yeah, thank you. I'll come in and answer that. Yes, in short, yeah, we're pretty confident that that target is on track to be delivered. I think the Mayor has really prioritised council house delivery over his terms, first and second terms, and indeed this one. There's a really strong record of council house delivery that we're building on here. So. On that basis and on the basis of all of the support and interventions that the Mayor has put in place to really boost council house delivery in London, we are confident that we're on track to achieve that 40,000 target by 2030.
So, as we all know, in the last couple of years, we've got a graph in front of us which shows actually the numbers were going up quite substantially, and then in 22, 23, so 2022, 23, the numbers start dropping off significantly in terms of starts, which obviously now impacts in terms of both starts and completions. What happened in 2022, 23 that has meant that what was, very, very strong delivery is suddenly tailed off?
I mean, I think what I'd point out is that, the conditions for house building in London are incredibly difficult. That is well documented. That said, the Mayor does really prioritise.
Sorry, Jamila, this isn't just a London thing. This is right across the country, isn't it? Something happened in 2022, 23 that has impacted on house building, not just in London, but across the country. Maybe Richard? So you wanted to go? Oh.
The challenges are not caused by London. They're caused by national factors and national policies, but they're most acutely felt in London. We have to be honest. The challenge is What happened in 22-23 was two things, one of which was the botched introduction of the second staircases regulation, the second of which was the introduction of the building safety regulator. Both right, absolutely the right thing to do by the previous government in principle, but both massively botched in practice. But because London has a far higher proportion of the buildings built in our city compared to the rest of the country that fall into the orbit of both of those regulations, then we are far more affected by that. At the same time as, because of the nature of the housing cost in London being higher, we were again, demand for private accommodation in London was more acutely hit by the post-mini budget hike in interest rates as well. So there are national factors about loss of labour post-Brexit and increase in cost of materials post-Ukraine war and the interrupted supply chains from the tail end of the pandemic. But the specific national factors that affect everyone are much more acutely felt in our city. And, you know, Robert Colville, who is not a man I would tend to recommend, but on this was quite interesting, I think, this was quite interesting, actually, had a very interesting kind of take on the impact of those from a political perspective that is not the Mayor's.
So at the moment, obviously, this is a before the end of the decade target, and clearly the government has also set an annual target of 88,000 homes effectively for London, so about 440,000 homes by the end of this decade. That's totality. So effectively, this is a proportion of that, 40,000 out of that potential 440. What's the government doing to help us achieve this target within that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the 88 figure that you refer to is the housing need target in total that's been identified for London, and this, of course, is specifically just council housing in London during that period. The next phase of the social and affordable housing programme will be a critical part of our ability to deliver that. So the funding that we receive will very much be a key part of our ability to achieve that figure.
And on that funding point, obviously Richard's points, costs have gone up significantly as part of that 22-23, those changes and those impacts, those external impacts. Has the new government done anything in the first year to reflect that in terms of funding?
Well, we're still sort of working on the terms of the next social and affordable housing programme, but we should say that it's incredibly welcome that for the first time we've had a sort of a long-term settlement for that programme. There's a 10-year settlement now, and I think I'm right in saying that it's the highest real terms amount for that period for that programme. So all of that will be massively helpful for our ability to achieve that target over the period.
And sorry, Richard, do you want? So in terms of the one of the challenges we have across London, of course, is not just building new homes, but also in terms of the number of empty homes, whether that's council or otherwise. And builds that are they're unable to sell, etc. Can we use some of the funding for acquisitions as opposed to house building in order to make sure the supply of genuinely affordable homes is increased through that method?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, as you're probably aware, acquisitions has been a key part of our ability to achieve targets around council homes in London, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case. I mean, it should be clear that ideally we're looking for new build. That's certainly the priority and that's certainly the focus. But the Mayor's Council Homes acquisition programme has been a key part of the ability to achieve those record numbers, and it will continue to be a part of the mix moving forward.
So those acquisitions, when they're new builds, would that count towards the target of 40,000?
I'll need to check that specifically, but I'm happy to do so and come back.
Okay. And do you have any idea of sort of what proportion that might be?
We don't, not least because that's very much the kind of devil in the detail stuff that you would find in like a clause on page 227 of the funding conditions of an affordable housing programme that we've got the headlines for at the moment, but the details are unclear. So the acquisitions, which I think are a valuable tool for very quickly delivering new affordable housing that wasn't previously available to families on the social housing waiting list, which is the point in new council housing, is potentially going to be a part of the mix. The degree to which that is not yet clear, and I'm sure Tom can update the housing committee as those negotiations carry on.
But effectively, the government has changed the rules in terms of how the money can be spent in order to allow for that, given
We don't know. It's too early to say. Is the honest answer. We've got kind of headline settlements on the AHP and guarantees that we can start spending that money at, as quickly as possible, building on from the 100 million extra money we got from the government as a kind of an emergency top-up grant last year, responding to the nature of the housing crisis. But the actual detailed negotiations that will decide some of that kind of thing from 26, like from next year onwards, when the current programme ends, is still yet to be finalised.
So sorry, just to clarify something you just said there. So there was some additional money that was allocated early doors to reflect the additional costs.
In one of the, I'm afraid I can't remember which one precisely it was, but in one of the early government financial statements, they allocated a chunk of extra money to social house building, of which London got a lion's share of that money.
I'm going to move on to rough sleeping, and the Mayor gave a very ambitious commitment to end rough sleeping for good by the end of this decade. Can you tell us about what progress and challenges you faced in achieving that?
Sure. So the Mayor's Rough Sleeping Action Plan was published earlier this year. That action plan essentially sets out the vision for achieving that target. It was very much developed in collaboration with partners across London. So, that's the boroughs, but also thinking about, voluntary sector providers and central government, because the Mayor's pretty clear that ending rough sleeping in London isn't something that we can achieve from City Hall alone. It does take that kind of strategic coordination across London, across all the different partners and agencies, as well as central government. So that action plan is really the blueprint for doing that, and sets out 3 core pillars for the steps that we think are required to achieve that really ambitious target of ending rough sleeping by 2030.
So, I mean, clearly it's, we've got five years left in order to achieve that. We've got the strategy in place, got some pillars that, are the foundations for achieving that. One of the key things, having worked in the charity sector, working with charities that support those who become rough sleepers, are we going to be providing longer term funding to make sure that we can actually get to this 5-year target?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different elements of the programme, of the strategy, of which funding is inevitably one, but it actually isn't just an issue of funding. Part of the issue, one of the pillars very much focuses on the way that services are coordinated in the strategic leadership that we should be providing from City Hall, so that the system in London actually makes sense. That's less one of funding, and that's more an issue of just how all of the different tiers of government and different partnerships work in London. Funding is obviously part of it, because it's crucial that the services are there for people when they are at that crisis point. Hopefully before they actually even have to have any nights out on the street at all. That's a core part of the strategy is intervening before people end up on the streets themselves. So that involves services, that involves that kind of that immediate space for people to to spend a kind of a safe night before having to end up on the street. And then there's longer term provision. What is the long term stable accommodation that people can then move into as part of a kind of a longer term vision for keeping people off the street. So yeah, absolutely, funding is a critical part of it, but isn't the only part.
Clearly, prevention is better than cure, particularly in this. One night out on the streets is one night too much for anybody, really, and then it's a downward spiral thereafter if we can't support them. But the point about the long-term funding is that actually you can put those strategies in place for a period of time, rather than having to worry about year to year whether you can continue with that strategy or have to shift again. One of the things is the question about how do we define ending rough sleeping. So explain it in lay terms. What would that absolutely look like in 2030? How do we know that we've actually achieved that successfully?
Yeah, there's a definition in the strategy actually, and put simply, it's that rough sleeping is brief, rare, and non-recurrent. So that we have ways of identifying people who are sleeping rough for the first time, and then how long people are sleeping rough for, and whether they are sort of continuing to come back to the streets even after they've accessed one service or another, whether they're then ending up back on the streets. So across those three measures, our definition of ending rough sleeping, at least sort of according to the strategy, is that we're not seeing people repeatedly coming back to the streets after they've accessed those services. And if they do end up on the street, it's very, very rare. It's not happening again, and it's certainly not happening for extended periods of time. So there are, you'll be familiar with the chain stats at the moment, which is observable people on the streets, and the strategy sets out that there'll be ongoing work with partners to work out a way of identifying a sensible metric versus where London has been, and then London versus other major cities across the country.
And sorry, just final question. So in terms of that metric, have we worked with those charities that work with rough sleepers to identify what that looks like, and everyone in the sector is clear about ending rough sleeping, what that looks like by 2030?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a core part of the strategy, is developing that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Actually, Richard, you were just talking about the housing delivery, the total target of 88,000 that the Labour government has set for London. Obviously, that's comprised, that's a sort of total of all of the targets that they've come up with for various boroughs. You've spoken about how difficulties created by boroughs, but for example, if you look at Camden, they have a target under this 88,000. Their share of that is 3,000 a year. They're currently consulting on a local plan that's going to deliver about 700 a year. I mean, do you not think that's a problem?
So there are no. I think, let's just be clear about the legal status of all of this. At the moment, the 88,000 is not London's legal target, although I think it's pretty clearly signposted that that is the government's intention to do that. And the next iteration of the London plan is the mechanism by which the Planning Inspectorate oversees the evidence base the GLA has come up with for a overall London plan target. So that will be published in the draft London plan, which is where this thing starts to have legal weight, will be published in the first half of next year. At the moment, they're on the 88. The borough allocations are not an allocation. They're a government-based assessment of need based on a single national formula. They are not an expectation of borough planning policies. What we need to do, working both with the government and with boroughs, is then start to allocate the overall, and this again, it will be part of the draft London plan, is allocate the overall 88,000 into, however, in that incredibly ambitious number that the government have handed to us, how you would then fit that more realistically into boroughs on the basis of some sort of sense of availability of land and other building opportunities. So there's nothing wrong with what Camden are doing at the moment. That is the planning process as it is set out in law, and it's incredibly, as we all know, carefully legally regulated. It's from the publication of the next London plan where those numbers will start to gain weight.
You said there's nothing wrong with it. So the current target for Camden in the currently London plan is 1,038, and our average delivery over the last 3 years was 502. And you're saying there's nothing wrong with that?
That wasn't what I said. I said their planning process.
You said there's nothing wrong with what Camden's doing.
I said there's nothing wrong with their planning. Sorry, in that case, let me clarify. There's nothing wrong with the planning processes Camden are going through at the moment. It's completely, these things are incredibly carefully regulated. They are following the regulations as they are set out.
Forgive me, Richard. The implication of what you're saying.
What I was going to say, sorry, Chair, is that all of London isn't building enough homes. We are really, really clear about that. There's both inner, middle, and outer London, and the Mayor has been very clear, both from the kind of Government of London dinner speech onwards, that he expects the boroughs, the GLA, and the government to all pull out all the stops to build the homes that London needs.
But forgive me for interrupting, but the logic of what you're saying is that you can't expect a borough to build any more than they are legally compelled by the sort of government whip. They must be forced to build this number. And yet you've said, everyone agrees that more needs to be built. But what you're saying is no one can expect, it's unreasonable to expect Camden to build more than a few hundred a year unless they are legally compelled to do so. But it's a Labour borough, it's the Prime Minister's own borough. If Labour agree the problem is that more homes need to be built, why aren't Labour boroughs getting stuck in before they're legally compelled?
Well, I think we're straying beyond the scope of the meeting, actually, because I wasn't aware that there was any specific manifesto commitment about Camden, and I think Tom is the Deputy Mayor responsible for all of this, and these questions may well be better aimed at him. But what I was trying to set out was the legal position around the numbers. the Mayor is very clear that there is both a housing crisis, where I couldn't have been clearer in my answer to Assembly Member Mahfouz earlier, that London is not building enough homes, and dense inner city areas like Camden are particularly prone to those issues of regulation BSR because of the height and density at which they have to build. However, everywhere needs to build more, and that's active conversations we're both having with government about how that can be made, how that can be supported, and with boroughs as well.
I bet you if Tom were here, he would say it was a planning issue, not a housing issue, and he would refuse to answer the question as well, based on my experience at Housing Committee last week. But we will move on. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, and it's good to be with my favourite person in the Mayor's team. So good morning to the three of you.
I'm getting grief over this.
I'm hell-bent on destroying your career, Richard. I've accused you of being a Tory. Now you're my mate. You know, it's all bad news for you, I'm afraid, when I open my mouth. But there we go. All three of you, thank you. No, Bassam will get your job. There we go. Finally, he'll get what he wants. Right, so, Richard, so the Mayor's Manifesto committed to unblock affordable house building by creating new land assembly zones and the mayoral development corporations. How is the Mayor planning to use these mechanisms to deliver housing, and what timelines should we expect?
With the critical words in that, where necessary. So, at the moment, as part of the conversations I was discussing with Neil around looking at what our strategic options are in the run-up to the publication of the next London plan, what further powers we need to deliver that, including land assembly zones, mayoral development corporations, but actually some potential other tools that have come forward, like mayoral development orders and things that potentially, the opportunities have come forward for since the election of the Labour government, are all under consideration. MDCs are a very powerful tool, as the Assembly pointed out at some length to me about Oxford Street, but they are also an expensive tool as well, because they take significant running costs and powers. So we are taking a proportionate view about where these are the right things to introduce. No decisions have been taken yet around where these will be introduced, because the London plan processes are the right way of doing that. But this work is kind of motoring with government at the moment, and I think we are making some progress on actually understanding what the right tools are to deploy where to proportionately move housing on as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Now, I do appreciate that you have been very nuanced in your response with regard to the land assembly zones and the MDCs, but I think. And it's good speaking to a fellow planning nerd. Obviously, being leader of a council, you would have had to have been. But I think just look around this area, right? A lot of untapped potential has been unlocked. And I'm not usually complimentary of the London Borough of Newham. But, as you can see with the development around us, they've pushed a lot forward. But the GLA and City Hall do own a lot of sites in this surrounding area. Areas, quite frankly, are derelict, non-used, former industrial, which could be very easy to build on, relatively cheap to build on, without the Mayor pushing through additional POWs, MDCs and land assembly zones. So therefore, given that the Mayor doesn't need those additional POWs or mechanisms to get building going, why aren't we doing that? Or why isn't the Mayor doing that?
Because of, and understanding the position on all of those sites in great detail, exactly the same viability reasons that we've talked about for housing elsewhere. The challenge remains that at the moment, any developer would tell you that building residential accommodation is the least profitable form of land use in London at the moment, which is why we're seeing a massive surge in increases for student housing, like PRS housing, offices, warehouses, industrial, and a whole range of other stuff as well, and a precipitative drop-off in permissions for and applications for new traditional residential housing. That is a problem that we are working hard to fix, and we will work with the government and with boroughs to fix. But the reality is, on all of the sites around here, that you don't need to look at that many GLAP board minutes to know that the viability remains the challenge. We're working through that with partners, investors at the moment. I think actually we're making quite significant progress in all of that, but the GLA's own land is caught up in exactly the same viability crunch on residential housing that everyone else's is as well. I think, but you're right though to say none of the areas in this area require changes to planning rules. They require changes to the economics of house building to get these going. That's not going to be true elsewhere in London. If we're going to get anywhere near the government's calculated level of housing need in London, then we're going to. It's not an either or. We just have to do everything. There could be areas in London where changes to planning regulations will enable delivery. The point is, these are not. We will not be using a sledgehammer to crack nuts here. These are tools that we will deploy where it will make a genuine difference to delivery.
No, and I appreciate that. And don't get me wrong, I've got some interesting views on viability a bit further on with my questioning. But, once again, you raise a very good point that, there are economic viability issues. I know politicians that, quite frankly, don't understand the housing market like to say, oh, the mini budget, this, Brexit, that. In reality, it is multifaceted. We all know that. You know that. Clearly, you understand that. Other people don't, but you do. But, let's be clear. I think when it comes to stage 2 referrals, going back to the point that for the Affordable Homes Programme, the Mayor had, if we're talking old money now, so the previous government, £9 billion, he spent £4 billion. But we know, and I think the house builders know and the sector knows, that the Mayor is sitting on a backlog of stage 2 referrals. And I think that is something. I don't know what the comparisons are for previous mayors of London. I can't speak to Boris or Ken's record, but over the last 9 years, we know we've got a big backlog of stage 2 referrals. So therefore, do you think that's part of the problem why the Mayor hasn't been able to spend, the rest of the £5 billion of the 9?
Not that I'm aware of. I will check. Sorry, I will check into the position on stage 2 referrals and write back to you, Assembly Member.
Yeah, no, and I think that would be really helpful because I think once again, politicians and the public do not understand the planning process. If you ask someone on the street, what happens if a development is over 150 units? Where does it go? What happens? Then you get the government, DHCLG involved, and Secretary of State. Most people, most politicians are not aware of how the process actually works. And I think you've illustrated that quite well in some of your responses.
If you don't mind me adding, though, the biggest, having spent all day, a fair chunk of yesterday at the LRAF and talking to, in the nature of my job, people in the development industry a lot, that stage 2 referrals from the GLA has never been raised with me as an issue from the industry. What is raised with me an awful lot is, number one, the BSR and the time it takes to get application through the BSR and the lack of communication and a whole range of stuff that Andy Rowe, well known to us all here, is now committed to sorting out, but is going to take in some time. And the impact of the second staircase regulations. They're the two biggest things that come up to us. There are things, and I will be frank, that developers raise with us about the London plan as well, issues around dual aspect, cycle storage, policy and whether that's proportionate and stuff like that. What I can tell this committee and what Jules told LREF yesterday is we've already published planning guidance making it very clear that those things are not tablets of stone. They're things that boroughs and the GLA planning team should all apply flexibly and proportionately to not block development. But if we have to go further than that in order to remove any London-based barriers to viability, we will do that. And that's a very clear commitment, and I expect to see some potential news on that.
And I appreciate your frankness. I think, but let's be honest for a second here. Given that house building starts and ends with the Mayor with regard to the planning process in this city on large-scale development, of course they're not going to moan to you about your boss's stage 2 referral blockages, whether it's his fault or not. Of course they're not going to bring that up with you. But I do appreciate the fact that they are bringing up the dual aspect stuff in the London plan and all that, because I know that's a real issue at the moment in the sector and viability. With regard to, and once again, I suspect I know how you're going to answer, but I genuinely mean this in a sincere way, contrary to what some people might think. The Mayor talks a lot about land zones. He talks a lot about MDCs. He talks about rent-controlled housing. But is it not just better to focus on the things that he can do, like, bringing in more staff to deal with stage 2 referrals, actually having, looking at areas around City Hall and things like that, and trying to get over the economic viability issues, than talking about things that are, quite frankly, time-consuming, as you've said, costs a lot of money, and are politically pie in the sky? We know the government, they've already said they're not going to give them rent control powers, so why are we still talking about it?
Well, rent control is something entirely different, but so my answer to your question, go back to what I said earlier, which is, given the scale of London's housing crisis, given no one is disagreeing, I think, with the government's need figure, even if London has never built 88,000 homes a year in its history ever, even in, I think it was 1931 or 2, where the only year in London's history that new builds has started with an 8. So this is an incredibly ambitious target the government has set, and therefore it's not a case of doing either or, it's a case of having to look at everything. I think there will be areas where, when it comes down to it, these kind of powers will be potentially useful. And I'd say that work with government is ongoing at the moment. What I'm not going to do is try and kind of foreshadow that as we kind of work through options with government, because a lot of this will also need potential further government funding, infrastructure remediation work, further infrastructure provision, and so on. Reality is, you can build as many houses in an area of, brownfield area of outer London, like Thamesmead, say, as you can take people to and from those homes quickly.
That's right.
So a lot of people is going to, a lot of this comes down to wider government investment in the city as well.
And I would say, just on a final point from me, because I suspect we might be in agreement here, but I don't want to ruin your chances of promotion any further. The moronic politicians and bureaucrats say, yes, 88,000 a year in London. Oh, yes, 1.5 million homes across the country. When they know, as well as we do, that at the time those promises were made, that was never deliverable. And what do you think it does to market confidence and to voter confidence when everybody knows these figures are never going to be met? Let's be honest, Richard, you've effectively conceded that. And I don't mean that as a criticism. It's an honest approach on your part. But 88,000 is never going to be met. Even in the best economic environment this country has ever had, in London, it's never been met. You've already said that. So why do we keep making ourselves hostage to fortune? And on a second point on that, one of the things that is not spoken about at the moment with regard to the Chancellor's changes to the tax regime is the land duty tax, right, which nobody seems to be talking about at the moment, which is a massive net cost on development. So we've now going to a 300% increase for developers to dispose of their waste, which statistically adds about £24,500 to every unit built. Have you guys made any representation to the government to say, if you want us to do 88,000, you've got to think again on this?
So two different points there. I think on your first one, I mean, forgive me, Assembly Member, I didn't say it will never be met. I said it was extremely ambitious. I think and unprecedented. I think the challenge of meeting that would require a whole of government effort and a whole of London effort to do that. We have set up a London housing mission. I think the way we are now working with London boroughs cross-party, I believe, as the GLA is the best it has ever been. I think the sense of London government doing what it takes is vital to both build government confidence that giving us money is a good investment. And I think a lot in the last year of those kind of better links have been built across decision makers in London. Again, largely on a cross-party basis. I think but it does require government to come to the party as well, both around funding for housing, funding for infrastructure, funding for brownfield remediation and site remediation, and a whole range of the other stuff as well as provision of effectively kind of sub-market loans, just some capital into a very capital-starved sector at the moment that can just get movement going. So I just, and our position, I'm just being frank about this, is this requires to hit the kind of unprecedented housing ambitions the government has for this city requires a whole of government effort, and we stand ready to do what it takes from our point of view as well, which will include I think, going further than we have done already in the last year to make clear that, you know, what our expectations are of local planning systems around applying what the current London plan sets out flexibly rather than kind of dogmatically, and, you know, looking at where the next London plan can be more clearly focused on housing delivery as well. And look, you know, we are, I don't mind saying, very clearly setting out in developing a new London plan to come out of that with having less of a viability burden on developers, because what made sense in 2018 when the last one was written simply is not affordable now. We know that. No one's kidding themselves.
But sorry, Richard. Sorry, and so very sorry, Chair, because it's a crucial point. That viability point is a nonsense, because planning committees get around that all the time. You know, they come with an application, say, oh, poor us, the viability is a bit dodgy, but we can do X, Y, and Z on affordable. They come back with another application, they slash the affordable again. I've seen it done on one application in Enfield about 2 or 3 different times, which is fine. You know, that's their business. But let's not pretend what we're really talking about is the affordable housing target, which I'm not expressing a view on it either way. But we all know that's what developers are talking about. So it's not the strict nature of the viability and the roughly 20% profitability. It's the affordability element, of which the mayor's been given lots of money by the previous government and lots of money by this government. So, you know, just on that point to clarify.
I think that's right, and, you know, we were the only area where we got on the 16 to 23 settlement. We're the only area of the country to have hit our target on. You know, we hit our target on all of that. We always knew that the 23 to 26 programme, because it is a 23 to 26 programme, because of the way the previous one was delayed by COVID, would be back-ended, and we are confident that we will hit the targets on that, despite these unprecedented and exceptional economic conditions. So I think I think our track record of delivering what we can with the funding we are given is clear. Where the challenges now in, I think, is much deeper than just like levels grant for AHPM. And I think you're right. I don't think we are disagreeing about all of this as well. I think we're agreeing both the nature, the complexity of the problem, and the fact that I still think there are large pockets of, like, the London government system that just still is living in a pre-pandemic world where they just assume housing delivery is a goldmine and therefore, you know, people should pay. It isn't. I'm very clear about that. The Mayor's very clear about that. Tom and Jules are very clear about that. And the planning system has to shift to adjust for that.
Thank you. And just on the land use tax, I appreciate you may not have an answer now on representations, but if you could just write to me and let me know if any were made. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not. Sorry, I missed answering that. We've made many representations to the government on an awful lot of things around housing delivery. I don't recall them.
No, and I appreciate it's a very niche area, so I'd be grateful if you could just let me know either way. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think there are indications. Just before we move on from housing, or, well, making London fairer, but it's been housing in practice. On this point you made about viability, Richard, and you said that housing is the least viable form of development. You know, you compared it with, I don't know, warehouses and offices and all the rest of it, student accommodation. Presumably what we're talking about there is the fact that the Mayor and many other politicians demand very high, or wish to have very high levels of, in inverted commas, affordable housing, which I would call subsidised housing. And it's the requirement to generate that subsidy, whether it's subsidised directly by the taxpayer through the affordable housing programme or a cross-subsidy within the development. That's the thing that's making all of these projects not viable, isn't it? So what we're seeing is the demand for very high levels of subsidised housing actually, on your own account, means that large amounts of housing is simply not happening.
No, I think it's much more complex than that. I'm not disagreeing with you that dogmatic approaches to viability levels and affordable housing is potentially an issue in some boroughs. I'm not disagreeing with that thing. However, it's much, much more complex than that. The biggest driver of lack of viability is the cost of building, which comes from regulation. We've just gone through a kind of historic period where land values were bought at pre-pandemic rates and have not adjusted, you know, because the land's already been bought. Developers have got that cost locked in, but are now selling at values that haven't gone up in line with what they anticipated they would post-pandemic when the land was built. So, and also the introduction of the second staircases rules, correct as they were, but botched as that was in practice, has meant that the costs of development have gone up substantially, and then the BSR has come along and has imposed a whole range of extra burdens on developers to provide information that was, in my view, perfectly well managed through the building regulation process whilst construction was happening, that they're now not allowed, that construction isn't allowed to start until the BSR has signed that off, and there's a massive backlog. The Mayor, all of the Mayor's team, strongly support the principle of the BSR. We strongly support the principle we strongly support the second staircases regulations. However, they have to be applied in a way that doesn't damage the ability of ordinary Londoners to get housing. The other, and this is the fundamentally insolvable thing in London, actually, that does require national intervention if it's going to make any difference, is the higher interest rate environment, and just the fact that mortgages, as many of us, including me, to our cost know, are just a lot more expensive than people assumed they would be 3 or 4 years ago, means that there simply isn't the demand for some of that private house. Developers are not confident there is demand at the prices that are now baked into the system they have to charge if they're going to make money from the development, because cost of financing for them as a project and cost of financing for the potential purchasers of that project becomes very difficult. And while developers are not confident they're going to sell their product, my fundamental challenge back to the free marketeers like Colville is, if you think developers are going to build at a rate that devalues their product, you have another thing coming, and developers are not going to build at a rate where they're not confident they can sell their product. And that is actually our biggest and most insoluble challenge without demand-side measures from the government.
You've described things that either are historic and have already happened or are baked in, such as the purchase price of land, or that in any case we as the GLA are not in a position to change. But the Mayor is one of those politicians who continues to take a position on a very high percentage of cross-subsidy or affordable housing. Do you think that is something that needs to change? Because that is something that could change, that would change the viability of projects and allow them to happen.
The London plan is very clear that development should offer a level of affordable housing that is affordable for that development. Building homes in London should not be a cash cow as it was pre-pandemic. I am pretty certain, looking at the figures, that for all the reasons I've outlined at the moment, residential development is simply not, isn't the gold mine that I think it once was, and that people perceive it, many Londoners still perceive it to be, for wholly understandable reasons, because the economics on this have changed exceptionally quickly. However, so I think that kind of pragmatic, properly following the London plan and taking a pragmatic approach on that is essential. What that leaves you, though, in going back to my previous point, is a trap where if there is developers like having higher levels of affordable housing in their developments to a degree, because it provides them a guaranteed income and it provides them an income from housing, where affordable housing providers buy that provision, it gives them much more certainty of levels of income they're getting in. Developers will be much more nervous about taking risk if, like, 80–90% of a development is private, in a context where people are struggling to find mortgages to pay for the product that developers now are kind of the costs of which are now baked in. So it's not as simple as saying just put more, charge more for homes, it's fine. I think there are fundamental demand issues that makes that very difficult, which is why this is such a wicked issue.
Perhaps I was unclear. I was not suggesting charging more. I was suggesting that reducing the burden of cost, one of which is the requirement to cross-subsidise, would make sites viable. So, the Mayor may demanding 50% affordability, and you're getting 50% of nothing. You could get 20%, let's say, or 30% of something.
I agree.
You don't think that's a sensible change?
As I've always said, as I've said 3 or 4 times in this evidence session, I think developers need to be pragmatic about that, because people live in homes.
I'm asking the Mayor. Is the Mayor going to change his position, or is he just going to stick to wanting 50%?
I think the Mayor has already changed his position in the practice guidance note that we issued before Christmas, and if the evidence is we need to go further, we will go further.
Okay. I don't see any other indications. I think we will now move on to our next section, which is making London safer. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. And I note, Richard, that you say you're very satisfied with the delivery of the manifesto. So if I can start asking questions of Jamila, please. Can I ask if you could speak a bit louder so I can hear? My hearing's not as good as it should be. The Mayor committed to 1,300 additional neighbourhood police officers and PCSOs, but since the Mayor's election, the Met has reduced the number of police officers and PCSOs by 1,400. So what are the implications of this for the Mayor's manifesto commitments on making London safer?
So
No, I asked Jamila.
I know, but I'm going to answer.
Why?
Because because you ask questions, we answer them, and we've chosen to split the questions up that way. So So, on the Mayor's Manifesto commitment, I mean, the straight answer to the question about are we going to hit it or not is it's too early to know. We're not, this was a commitment until 2028, and we are still some way off that point, and there's still a number of budgets and other financial settlements to go. What I think you are right to identify, and the Mayor, I'm not saying anything the Mayor hasn't already said, is that the current financial settlement for the Mayor isn't sufficient. Police officer numbers, therefore, did drop last year, and we continue to lobby hard for the resources in order to get the increase in police officers at the same time as the Mayor continuing to do whatever he can, which is both putting significant extra resource into the police. Mayoral funding for the police has doubled under this administration, and mayoral funding alone secured a further 935 officers that would otherwise have been lost.
Okay, so Jamila, when you're looking at your monitoring reports, is it sort of a RAG system, and is therefore this coming up as red?
So on this one, we are, as I say,
is Jamila not capable of answering questions?
Chair, so with respect,
it's Jamila's job to monitor. I'm asking her how she monitors.
With respect, Chair, it's not appropriate for committee members to ask that sort of question of paid officers of the authority.
That's where you're wrong. It is for us to ask who we want to, actually.
No, and it's for us to choose who will answer with respect. So I will answer this.
What are you concerned about that I can't ask an officer? Jamila's job is to monitor. She very eloquently told us how she monitors this at the beginning, and I'm asking her how she's particularly monitoring this.
Because it's a point of principle in a 3-hour session that we get to divvy these things up between us, and this is how we choose to do it, and that's the end of the matter.
That's very interesting. So, if it's a red rag system, is this showing up as red?
Yeah, I think this is one of the more absolutely. So we don't have that kind of colour rag system, but this is one of the more challenging ones, clearly.
Well, your systems aren't very visible anyway. I'm just trying to find out how you know what's going wrong. I mean, this is blatantly obvious for all of us. So when the Mayor announced the commitment to 1,300 additional neighbourhood police officers and PCSOs, I'm assuming he was taking it from the baseline that we were at in May, which would have been 35,291.
Yes, I think that's right. So is that May? Is that May 2024?
That, she could have answered it without telling you.
Excellent. Is that May 2024 baseline?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so that is the baseline then. Yes.
So we can absolutely confirm it. Obviously, nobody else is allowed to talk to me, which is interesting in itself. You're absolutely confirming that the baseline for the promise of 1,300 additional police officers was 35,291. You've said yes once. Jamila's not allowed to talk to me.
That is correct. That is the level that it was at in May 24 at the time of the election, and that's what we're counting from.
Thank you, Jamila. Thank you. Do you see? It's perfectly capable. So, Richard, do you not regret that the Mayor made that commitment, given it's clearly going to fail, and it doesn't look like there's any circumstances in which we'll end up with 1,300 on top of that?
So the Mayor made the commitment he did. We continue to strongly lobby for the Labour government for the funding that we need. It's important, I think, that we are ambitious and set ourselves some clear targets, and we were very clear with the government what we think the level of police funding is that London needs.
Yeah, it wasn't a target, though, was it? It was a manifesto pledge. I will put an additional 1,300 police officers on our streets, said Mr. Khan when he was looking for the votes.
And PCSOs.
Yes.
And PCSOs and special counsel. Just to be clear, you said officers.
No, I do understand.
The definition was all three.
Yeah. So you think that he's definitely going to make that, do you?
Yeah, and I think this is also so we will see, won't we? And we will know definitively in 2028. The pledge is also, I think, therefore, can be interpreted about some of the stuff we are doing with the Met at the moment, about actually getting police officers out from behind desks and out into communities as well. And no doubt we'll come on to talk more about this at the moment, but I think the Commissioner and the Mayor have both been very clear that there are too many officers tied up on duties you do not need warranted police officers to do, and that police time is much better taken up being out there in communities as well. So some of this is also about getting officers out onto the streets, where I think we would all as a committee want them.
One of the reasons we're doing that is that we cannot recruit. We're seeing a loss of people from the Met Force at a rate of knots, and that seems to be getting worse. So no wonder they're taking them, what's the phrase, taking from Peter to pay Paul or whatever it is. That's what they're doing, because they're leaving in their droves. That's because they're not properly supported. And so if we're not recruiting more, and that's why we're losing so many, I mean, we've lost 1,400.
So I wasn't sure if there was a question there.
Oh, sorry. Well, you see, I put questions to Jamila, not allowed to answer. And then suddenly you say there isn't a question.
I'm very happy
and at the beginning of the meeting, you said you're very satisfied with the delivery of the manifesto.
So when
I'm trying to find out how Jamila actually works that out in her monitoring reports, I'm not allowed to talk to her. Very interesting.
What we did say was, with a couple of exceptions, of which I've been pretty transparent that this is one of the ones that we are concerned about, but we're not writing off yet.
I thought you were concerned about housing, Richard. So you were concerned about housing and policing.
I'm concerned about the overall housing picture. I'm confident about the 40,000 commitment for new council homes that we were asked about.
Some of us are concerned about everything that this mayor is doing. I'll go on to the next question, and this is addressed also to Jamila. The mayor's manifesto commitment to reduce violence against women and girls was a key element of his manifesto. Incidents of sexual offences, including rape, have increased since the election. What steps are being taken to reverse this trend and achieve the commitment?
Thank you, Assemblymember Hall. So the Mayor is absolutely committed to delivery of this commitment and to reducing violence against women and girls in the capital. We are currently working on the refresh to the VORG strategy, which will set out the next steps for how some of that will be delivered. But it's worth saying that there's already a huge amount of work underway across a range of factors, and that the existing VORG strategy sets out a number of pillars which continue to be in development. On the specifics of increases in reporting, I think it's worth saying that increase can actually be indicative of increasing confidence in the police to actually respond to that reporting. And so it's a mixed picture around whether that is necessarily a kind of a totally negative indicator. There's increased evidence that when VORG is reported, that it's being better responded to and is being followed through into more prosecution than it used to be. So all of that means that it's complex. It isn't simply straightforward to say that increases in reporting is an automatically bad thing.
Yep, I do understand that, although I do understand that every single year I'm told that it's great that the numbers have gone up because it means there is greater reporting. And if we look at the figures, so far this year there's been nearly 19,000 sexual offences. Just 2,200 victims got a positive outcome. That is less than 12% of victims getting justice. So that's what I'm referring to. What is the Mayor actually going to do to get that rate up? Because this is a key manifesto pledge.
Yeah, I mean, as you all know, the Mayor really pioneered a revolutionary approach to looking at the way that violence against women and girls is reported and treated in the Metropolitan Police Service with the Opsateria approach. So we're really looking to build on that now over the course of this term. The Mayor will continue to kind of roll out that approach and deliver on the commitments that are in the refreshed VORG strategy when it's published later on this year.
Jamila, he may have a revolutionary approach, but he doesn't even know what a rape gang is. So that doesn't bode well, does it?
Could you tell me what manifesto commitment that refers to?
Oh, he should have put it. He should have put a manifesto pledge in to look into rape gangs, And because it's not a manifesto pledge, he claims not to know what they are. Well, I never. You never fail to amaze me. Never fail to amaze me. Some of these statistics are appalling. Less than 12% of victims getting justice. Do you think that's acceptable, Richard? Or do you want somebody else to answer that?
No one thinks that's acceptable. Clearly, not us, not the Met, not any element of the criminal justice system. The Victim Commissioner's recent report on why cases do not come to fruition, I think, was really interesting. And I, congratulate Claire on the national position that she's got, and I think she'll do that excellently. But I think you have to look at this all the way through the criminal justice system, both from the approach of the police, where I think significant progress has been made. We're seeing, rape. The rape solved rate has doubled in recent period, for example, from a highly unacceptable, to levels that we would all say are still unacceptably low, but progress on the bits that on our watch are is being made, all the way through to the way the CPS Act, the way the Court Service Act, where there are currently rape trials being scheduled now for 2028 and 2029 in London, which is, no form of justice I think any of us would recognise. And I think there has to be a whole system effort of which the Mayor and the Met are a part of that. But frankly, this is a system-wide failure that we are, that the bits under our control are a relatively minor part of.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question, but I've taken from that particular question that because rape gangs were not in the manifesto, that is why the Mayor doesn't understand them.
I think, Mr. Chair, sorry, that was I'm assuming that's a question, so I will answer it. I think that was
don't make assumptions, Mr. Watts. It wasn't a question, it was a statement.
That was a
Let's go on to the next
statement.
question. Jamila, if you're allowed. Is the Mayor on track to deliver 250,000 positive opportunities to steer young people away from crime?
Thank you. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. We're looking at data across the GLA group at the moment to sort of confirm precisely what the total so far is, but it's approximately in the region of around 160,000 positive opportunities have already been created this term across the GLA group. And I should say that approach to positive opportunities and to that investment in youth clubs is comprised of a range of different projects delivered by, in large part, the Violence Reduction Unit, but also teams in the GLA who focus on community sport provision, for example. Some of the mentoring work that was a critical focus during the last term. So that work is progressing well, and we should be well on track to achieving that.
Well, then that's really good news. Is there any chance you could send us your monitoring reports on that with explanations so we can actually see where that's going? Because you're talking of large numbers there, for which I'm really pleased. We must find positive opportunities for young people. I'd just be very interested, I'm sure the rest of the committee would be, in exactly where they are and what we're offering them. I mean, can you demonstrate how any of those particular things influence levels of youth crime and their involvement in crime? What would you say was the biggest thing?
Sure. I mean, just on monitoring reports, before I come on to that second point, just to say that will absolutely be part of the quarterly reporting that does come to the Assembly when all of that is finalised. And again, I'm sure Faye can say a little bit more about that if you'd like her to. On the second part of your question around evidencing the impact, I think there's a few elements to that really. I think one is that there is tons of evidence out there around the impact of positive early interventions in a diversionary and preventative approach to steering young people away from crime. That's the whole premise behind the introduction of the Violence Reduction Unit. Very much based on a preventative model and on intervening early to create those opportunities for young people to develop skills and engage in a variety of positive activities to divert them away from crime. So that evidence base is quite strong and is what underpins the whole approach behind the focus in positive opportunities, early intervention, the VRU's approach. The second element, I suppose, is that of those projects that I referred to, they will all have a set of criteria that they were hoping to achieve. They'll all have sort of evaluations that are associated with them, and they will demonstrate that those opportunities that we fund are high quality opportunities, high quality interventions, high quality opportunities, which do make a difference for those young people who present with all of those risk factors, which mean that they may be more likely to end up involved in crime. And I guess the final point is really looking at outcomes. You know, the homicides have been homicides are at their lowest level in I think a number of years. I forget the precise statistic now, but over this summer, there's another example. You know, it's the first summer in a while that we've seen no homicides of under 25-year-olds. So it's that approach, that preventative early intervention approach, is really bearing fruit.
Well, that's good. And what's the average opportunity cost?
I don't have that figure in front of me.
Do you have it?
It's
not in front of you, but do you have it? Do you assess how much this is costing?
Well, I'm sure that we could look at a cost per intervention, but I don't.
You don't do it as a norm. I'm just wondering. You know, obviously, finances are tight everywhere. Looking at the cost implications of anything we do is vital. Is that your job, or would that be Faye's job to look at the costings of these things?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that over the course of the Mayor's term, we've invested more than 100 million into those positive opportunities. I mean, I think that's a positive investment when it's diverting young people away from being engaged in violence.
It depends how many people you can link to it, and then you'd get your cost, wouldn't you? Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
If it's helpful on that one, just the performance data the Violence Reduction Unit publishes on some of the stuff that they are doing has I think a quite sophisticated kind of value for money criteria, because you know that is a key thing. There are also evaluation reports for all of the work that will be directly commissioned through the GLA that will give us that information in due course.
Thanks. Just on this police numbers thing, just to clarify, so we started needing to do 1,300 extra officers over 4 years. That's about 300 extra officers per year. We're now in a position where you need to add 2,700 officers over 3 years. That's not 300 officers a year, but 900 officers a year. And you've sort of implied the answer to that might be, you know, a windfall from government, but presumably you know that the overall Home Office settlement was a real terms cut, and the ring fencing effectively of the police budget within that was predicated on all the non-police bits of the Home Office being cut even more severely, and that includes counter-terrorism and border security, where it seems to me cost pressures are not disappearing. So presumably you recognise the risk is not that you might suddenly get a load of extra money, but in fact you might not even get the money that you've really been promised. So, you know, where would that leave us? Because what options have you looked at to be able to fund this from GLA budgets if the government continues to fund police in the way that it is?
So, you are right to say, and the Mayor has been, I'm not saying anything the Mayor hasn't explicitly said already, that while we have not yet got the kind of 3-year Met settlement, and I don't want to prejudice anything that we may hear on that, because we're not going to get that news for a while, the overall Home Office funding settlement was concerning. It doesn't, on the face of it, seem to contain enough money to keep policing numbers up across the country or meet. And you know, the government have got their own commitments on police numbers, and you know, one assumes they will be looking to fund that at some point. And this is the kind of thing that, in my experience, money has kind of tended to come up for year on year in budgets as kind of money becomes available. So we will see how that. The reason we're not making any definitive judgments on this commitment yet is we'll see how this one plays out. I suspect there's still some water to go under the bridge on it, but the Mayor has been very clear in speaking out on behalf of Londoners about his concern about the overall Home Office settlement, even though we don't have a precise understanding yet about what that means for the Met and for London. In terms of what we can do from City Hall resources, as I say, we have done everything we can. We found extra money last year. The Mayor's overall spending on the police has doubled since he has assumed office. We have become a far higher proportion funder of the Met, as government funding, largely under the previous government, has shrunk, and City Hall funding has therefore increased. We will continue to prioritise safety when looking at whatever extra resources are potentially available in the budget process. But all of this is very early to say, because we're not going to know any of this until we understand more about the fair funding settlement, as a number of colleagues raised last night, and the GLA's kind of 3-year financial package. So I mean, the basic position is the Mayor has done and will continue to do whatever he reasonably can from his own resources, but the
He's being let down by the government?
No, I wouldn't say that. But
I didn't think you would say that, but
yeah,
that might be true, though, mightn't it?
I need to remind myself politically restricted, so I'll leave politicians to comment on that one.
OK. Richard, I notice you're much more enthusiastic sticking the boot into the Conservative government than the Labour borough of Camden. But we move on. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you. Just a quick request for an update on the progress of the V100 and the impact it's had. Jamila.
Sure. I don't have specific numbers in front of me, but I can say that from the Commissioner's recent update to the London Policing Board that the model continues to work really effectively and is certainly keeping reoffending down. But I'd have to follow up on specifics.
Okay. So if we can keep track and report back to committee, I think on the VAW commitment, it's quite an important issue. And just going on to funding, so I'll turn to Richard on this. So the main sources of funding for the Met Police, is it still Home Office, National Government, and then the Mayor's preset? Yeah.
Correct, yes.
So in both cases, in the last few years, you've mentioned that the mayoral funding element has gone up every year. What's happened with the Home Office or national element of that over the last 2 years?
So the having had funding for both in actual terms and cash terms under the previous government, it has gone up under this government significantly. What that hasn't yet done is bridged the financial gap that was in the Met funding that basically the current government inherited. So the problem we have got in Met finances is a historic one. Government funding is increasing, but not at the rate it would take to undo all of the damage that was inherited from the previous government. Where, for example, and we've seen this, the acute financial pressure on the Met caused by a whole range of kind of protests and demonstrations in London, all of that kind of stuff, all of the, the state visits, whatever it is, all the stuff that the Met has to deal with because it is the police force covering the capital city. Again, that grant has significantly risen under this government, but still not to the level, not to the level that fills in the hole in Met finances created by what are effectively national duties that just happen to fall on the Met because they police the capital city.
Just based on that answer, can you then just recognise the difficulty that Londoners are having in comprehending some of these changes that are happening? Because the two main sources of funding for the Met Police, so you talk about national government and the Mayor's element, both have gone up. But in reality, what we're seeing is still a large budget gap in what the Met Police have, and that includes an issue that I think we're going to go into questioning into more detail later around front counter closures and police number cuts. We've already spoken about as well, the reduction in police officers. But the two main sources of funding for the Met Police have gone up, but actually people are getting less in terms of a service and the numbers that are being reported from the Met Police side. Is there a fundamental issue around how the Met's handling its budget?
Well, I think that is a question really better put to the Police and Crime Committee and the Deputy Mayor, or even frankly the Met. I think internal Met processes have improved significantly. From my more limited experience, this is more David's job than mine, to be honest. My experience of dealing with the Met is in their internal processes, their internal budgeting has improved very significantly under the new Commissioner and the new leadership team that he has put in place. Things are getting, the Met has a better grip, and I think, frankly, some of the data that has informed some of the evidence base around some of their choices is as a result of having a better grip on the evidence and the data in the budget that they have got. And I, as always, want to put on record our thanks to the Commissioner for the work he is doing to kind of improve the improve the service that Londoners are getting, and there was a big job, and I think he's doing it. The challenge remains, but fundamentally, better budgeting can't get round a £1.1 billion hole that was in the Met's finances at the time of this time just over a year and a half ago. That we'd found some sticking plasters to cover, but that growing financial gap getting to 1.1 billion simply isn't coverable by sticking plasters, and that is the legacy that we are now trying to deal with.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Just a very quick question on police numbers and specifically the Labour pledge, the Mayor's pledge. I've got it here. Work with the Labour government to put an extra 1,300 neighbourhood police officers and PCSOs on the streets. Can we just get an assurance that those are brand new uniformed officers, and the officers being redeployed from the Royal Parks, the officers being freed up from behind desks at police front counters? I mean, technically they could be new officers on the streets as opposed to performing other duties. So is this going to be 1,300 hot off the press, brand new officers? Because there could be some fiddle-faddling going on with that number.
I mean, that isn't how we've approached these questions. As I say, it was the London Labour Party that wrote the manifesto, not me. So I'm trying to interpret their words. But I think we have interpreted this as new officers, yeah.
Thank you. Quick question, very quickly. I mean, we have the question here, which is the Mayor still committed to the pledge to maintain at least one 24-hour police front counter at every borough? But obviously, he has now abandoned that pledge, saying that when the facts change, he changes his mind. If the Met could secure additional funding, and therefore the facts would have changed again, would there be any appetite from the Mayor to change his mind once more?
I think the Mayor has been very clear, and I think that the operational decisions around how the Met deploys its money, in this case of more money becoming available, is primarily one for the Commissioner. Because it's not the balancing the Met's budget in this way are fundamentally operational decisions. I'm not in a position to speak for the Commissioner what he would do in this kind of hypothetical scenario of where more money becomes available. The strong impression I get, though, is the Commissioner and the Mayor both share a view that if you've got more money, it is better deployed on getting officers out on the streets than it is them sitting behind desks in buildings. Yeah,
it's one of those odd political irregular verbs, isn't it? I make a manifesto commitment, she makes a operational decision. The question which I would ask is that, did you give advice to the Mayor ahead of him finalising his manifesto that it would be possible to maintain a front counter in every London borough 24/7?
No, GLA officers were not involved in writing the manifesto. That would be, it was a Labour Party document.
Okay. Are you aware of significant changes of facts, either in the budget of the police or in the number of people who have been visiting police front counters for any reason that would enable the Mayor to quite confidently say the facts have changed?
I think what the Mayor was referring to last night was the fact that the Met, because of the better budgeting, analytical data and capacity that they have got, when in looking at tough choices and in managing the difficult decisions the Commissioner undoubtedly faces, starts to have a look at that value for money thing. And the Commissioner made operational decisions that were to get the best value for money available. I mean, the facts are, the changes in the position on front counters in the end comes down to that kind of operational decision-making about where money is best available, but done on the basis, I think, of a pretty robust evidence base. And it's still worth saying, they're still formally out to consultation, and people can continue to talk to the Met and the borough commanders and other people around how how individual decisions can play out on the ground.
Well, this is not the case, is it? Because the Commissioner has been quite clear that this is not going to go out to public consultation. It's only going to go out for consultation with stakeholders. So when we say people, That's not necessarily London as a whole.
So it's stakeholders, yeah.
Who went to the polls based on, and I appreciate that not everybody goes on every single manifesto commitment, but to have a manifesto commitment which is based on lack of evidence, it's based on knowing, in your own words, that there was a 1.1 billion hole in the police budget about 18 months ago, so just as the Mayor was doing his manifesto, that people were going in trusting both the Mayor and the Metropolitan Police to deliver on this pledge. There is a fundamental issue, is there not, that this cuts right to the heart of trust not only in the Mayor, but also in the Metropolitan Police?
I'll take that as a rhetorical political point, really. I mean, I don't really have a lot more to add on this than the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor have both been quizzed at length about it. I've already said, really. I mean, the Assembly's been around this one repeatedly. I mean, the position is the position.
Okay, well, I'll try a different tack then. As somebody who has, in a past life, been a leader of a local authority, who has operated in the political sphere, do you think that politicians should be making manifesto commitments based on what are, in their view, essentially operational decisions, therefore something over which they have absolutely no control?
Again, I mean, I appreciate why you're asking, Assembly Member. I think but we are where we are on this one. I mean, I'm not sure there's a great deal I can add to the statements that the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, the two people more directly responsible for this than I can to me. I mean, we have been pretty clear, I think, now that this is the one commitment that we are, you know, that we have put a red, you know, metaphorical red flag against. I think the Mayor was clear last night about his view on it. That is where we are.
Okay, thank you, Chair. No further.
Unfortunate number of red flags flying over City Hall.
The People's
Assembly
flag is,
Member-
of course, deepest red. Yes.
This is what I hear. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, panel. My question is to you, Jamila. So, Jamila, it is proposed to it is proposed to close the 24 hours front counter at Dagenham Police Station. The local Member of Parliament, Margaret Mullen, has been leading the campaign to keep the counter open. She recently submitted a FOI, a Freedom of Information Inquiry, asking for information about the costs of the capital works completed during the refurbishment of the station in 2023. She was informed that, amongst other works, £297,931 was spent on refurbishing the front counter area. And yet here, we have the Met, a few months later, planning to close the counter. Would it be right to say that this, in my opinion, can rightly be seen by the general public as a waste of money?
I'm sorry, Assembly Member, I really don't feel that that's something I can give you an answer to. I think that's a question for the Met.
Well, yeah, but here we have the Met talking about, you know, making savings and so on. That's been the argument of the Met. And a few months later, a front counter that's been refurbished for a sum of just under £300,000 is being closed.
Yeah, again, that's not something that I can speak to really. That's an operational point for the Met to respond to, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, I suppose you'll give the same answer, Richard.
Yeah, because it's the only answer we're in a position to give, I'm afraid.
Well, we'll forward this query to the Mayor is the Police and Crime Commissioner. Will you forward this query on his behalf to the Met?
I'm sure, and I think maybe if you write to the Deputy Mayor who has responsibility for all of this, then she can come back to you on the matter.
Okay. I don't think I can take this any further, Chair, but that's a waste of money.
Thank you. I don't see any other indications on this topic, so that brings us to, very neatly, roughly the halfway mark. So I'm going to propose a medium-sized 10-minute comfort break. So we will come back here, let's call it 11:35, so actually 11 minutes. There we go. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I think if we're all ready, we've got, I don't know, about 7 seconds left on my watch, which we'll call time. Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second half of our Budget and Performance Committee this morning, where we're looking at the Mayor's commitments in his manifesto and how they're being delivered. We now move on to our next section, which is Making London Greener, where we start with Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is on the Mayor's commitment on a 100% zero-emission bus fleet by 2030. Now, in June 2024, the Mayor said that while this could be achieved through additional funding from the government, I believe the gap, looking at this, I think 2 years ago, was about in the region of about £500 million, and they were looking more at, with the funds that TfL have, to meet this by 2034 rather than 2030. So what is now the exact cost of bringing this target date forward? And what are the factors that TfL are taking into consideration for meeting the accelerated target to 2030 now?
Thank you, Assemblymember Harani. I'll answer that. The short answer is that TfL is engaged in its business planning process at the moment, and that will determine our ability to achieve that target. The Mayor is certainly committed to the target. And has asked TfL, as you've referred to look at what's possible and to look at how to bring that forward. But ultimately, our ability to do that will be dependent on the outcome of that business planning process.
Okay, and what are the timelines of that process?
It's ongoing at the moment. I think it will conclude in the next couple of months. I mean, Richard, you might know more precisely than I do.
Absolutely fair, actually. Yeah.
So effectively, there'll be the TfL's budget would be part of the formal budget cycle, which will come back to this. You'll be scrutinising that when you're part of this committee. I can't remember myself now. I've stepped in and now I can't remember the timelines. It'll be December and then through to January, through to the spring next year.
Okay. And are you aware of any potential bus routes or buses that have actually gone the other way, sort of gone from EV to being diesel powered?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so I'm aware of one in my constituency, the 28 bus, which when it moved from a different provider, went from EV to being diesel powered, still ULEZ compliant. So for vehicles or routes that have been impacted in a negative way, given the Mayor does have a target for up to 2030, can we look at prioritising routes where that pledge seems to have gone the other way?
As I say, the process will be determined as a result of the business planning process. I mean, at the moment, as routes are coming up for renewal, that's the mechanism by which they are being electrified. As I wasn't aware of that particular one that you're talking about, but the strategic approach has certainly been to look at routes as they come up for renewal and to electrify them that way.
I mean, you're right to identify the key. I'm not aware of that particular incident either. It wouldn't surprise me if there were a few other routes across London. What has happened recently is a couple of bus operators have basically dropped out of providing service and have had to be replaced at short notice to protect services with whatever available fleet that those bus companies had. I mean, there could well be another few incidences of that kind of step, but the aim, obviously, then, but is, this is a bigger question about how TfL operates its bus network. Is then that every operator is providing those zero electric buses with all the consequent work around power supply and stuff that plugs into garages.
Sure. And what are the parameters of the review? So are they looking at the 2030 as a target and saying this is what will be required to achieve it? Are they looking at to achieve this target, we can achieve it, but not until beyond 2030, and this would be the budget gap? What exactly are they looking at?
So this target will be achieved. I think the current date is either 2034 or 2032, as basically if nothing happens, because we're just buying electric buses now, and that's the point we're at the moment. If nothing happens, the whole fleet will turn over. What the Mayor's tried to do, and is pushing TfL to be ambitious here, is to bring that target date forward in order to make the air of London even cleaner, building on the enormous progress that we've seen as an administration over the last eight or 9 years. So the TfL business planning process, which Faye is right to say, will become public through the group budget process, which will just take place in its normal way. We'll talk about how we can do that.
Thanks. Can I just ask a quick question about this electric bus thing? I want to not quite challenge your suggestion. Well, I do want to. So you said we're at the point where we're just buying new buses and replacing the fleet one by one. But actually, there's more to it than that, because I got a lovely tour around the newly converted electric bus station in Sutton a year or two ago. And what I noticed is this enormous change. Like the whole garage has to be changed over from a diesel supply process over to electric supply process, additional electricity coming in. There's effectively an entire new substation being added outside the bus station to supply what is actually an enormous demand for power. And I think of some other bus stations that I'm familiar with, and I wonder how they're quite cramped and don't have space around them. And I wonder how all of that accommodation will be made. And so I challenge the idea that we simply keep buying electric buses and the problem solves itself. And instead, I think at some point, somebody has to solve those very difficult problems of what you do with those depots where converting them to electric is a challenge. So are they on your radar, and what's your plan?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with you that there is significant investment involved in transferring those buses to electricity supply. And TfL are working through that with providers at the moment. It's not an overnight job. This is, as you quite rightly say, some complex work, but that work is ongoing. The other element of all of this is, and we will, as we go through the net zero stuff, that a bunch of the way that we are reducing London's climate impact is moving into, is electrifying more to move away from kind of fossil fuels. And, so a lot of the, like the more strategic work we are doing as an administration in that space, and now working with London councils and the private sector through the London Energy Mission as well, is to really start to understand what are London's future power demands. And while we are not an electricity provider, we are, as London's strategic authority, I think, best placed to bring some of that work together. And Mette Coban, I'm sure, can answer questions on all of that, because I think actually understanding how we meet the kind of power needs needed for growth, for decarbonisation, a whole range of other stuff is clearly a kind of big strategic 20-year challenge for the city.
Okay, I suppose the challenge I'm putting is it's not simply about investment. If you have a bus depot where there's just not space to convert it, that's not an investment challenge, that's a complicated challenge. And I just wondered whether there were any of those that are on your radar, because it would fundamentally undermine your ability to meet that manifesto pledge.
Not specifically that are on my radar, but okay. Seb Dance may well be able to.
Can I give you a hint to go and scan, because there's definitely a few out there. Okay, Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to schools, and undoubtedly the Mayor is very keen to ensure that we improve air quality across the city, and particularly for the next generation. So those attending school is where the focus very much for this term is moving to. We've got the Greener Schools pilot, which is part of a over £12 million spend across London, which is meant to conclude by March next year, with learnings to inform future plans. How will the successes of that pilot feed into the future programme, and will we see potentially additional investment going in over the remainder of this term?
Yeah, thank you, Assembly Member. Yeah, that's right. As you say, the Greener Schools pilot is ongoing now. It launched in January this year. And is rolling out across 18 boroughs to 48 schools, I think it is, across the capital. A number of projects actually are already completed, it's worth saying, and we expect the remainder to be done by the end of this year. There is a strong evaluation model in place. We're working with a delivery partner called Braft. They are, they're experts in this field, and they're going to work really closely with each individual school and the borough to assess the impact of the interventions that were put in place in each school. Look at value for money, for example. And a range of other factors to identify what the learnings might be to inform what future programme could look like, be that specifically thinking about what steps the GLA could take, but also boroughs, also government. So yeah, that's very much part of the design of the programme.
So I appreciate this is a little bit in the detail, but in terms of project delivery, you'd expect the project to have finished off in terms of delivery of whether it's new solar panels, trees, etc. And then there'd be an element of assessment that would go thereafter before you then make a decision financially in terms of investing going forward. What does that timeline look like?
Yeah, as you say, I think we're looking at sort of March next year for completion of certainly all installations should have happened by then. There'll then be a process of doing that assessment. As you say, I imagine that will take over the course of next year. But I just want to be clear about sort of any future steps after that. I think we're very much looking at this as as a citywide approach. It won't just be for what the GLA can do. The learnings will be useful, we hope, and applicable for boroughs, for government as well. So it's about that kind of working partnership. It won't necessarily just be a case of GLA investment in future programming, not least because the scale of investment that would be required to input the types of interventions that we're supporting with this pilot to put that level of intervention in every school in London is well beyond the financial capability of the GLA alone. So this would have to be a sort of a more holistic approach than that.
And I guess part of that value for money statement would show what money's been saved by the school by, for example, installing solar panels and so on. But so we've got the funding in place for this year. In terms of how close to meeting the commitment would we be by the end of March, and therefore what would still need to be achieved in that cross-London partnership going forward in order to cross the line?
I mean, as far as the commitment goes, I think the intention was very much to demonstrate what was possible. So I think from our perspective, this pilot does that. It meets the spirit of the commitment, which was to run a pilot, to test, to assess what is doable, what's achievable, and then work with partners to roll that out further. I think I'd be satisfied that once we have a good set of learning and evaluation from this pilot, that we can then share with others, including government. That's the commitment discharged, really.
All right, I'm going to move on then to the Mayor's School filter programme. So making sure that we've got clean air within schools themselves, so where obviously kids spend the majority of their days. It was due to launch early this year. It's almost £3 million invested in that. We've got a very clear target of achieving 200 schools by 2028. How many schools have currently got filters, and how likely are we in order to achieve that by the end of this term?
Sure. So the procurement concluded earlier on in this spring, and there are 8 schools that have already received their filters, with a further 63 due to receive them this month and next month. Looking ahead, I think we're expecting by the end of this spring term next year, so in 26, that will have rolled out to 200 schools across the capital. So I think that we're looking at roughly, at least 7 per borough. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
No, sorry. So you're saying by spring next year, you're hoping to have already hit the 200?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So is that something that you'll then put a pause on, or is that something you hope to just continue to overachieve on that manifesto pledge?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to the Greener Schools programme, really, we'll be working with a partner to assess the impact of that rollout. I mean, schools aren't just getting air filters, they're also getting the air quality monitors, so there's an inbuilt mechanism to assess the impacts that filters are having. Once the findings of that work have been, assessed, written up, we'll then be able to share that learning with partners again, work out what would be a sensible next step in the approach. But yeah, we'll have achieved rollout to 200 schools by spring next year.
And just finally, in terms of that selection of the schools, because clearly some schools are more closely located next to the major artery roads of the city, whether in my part of the world it's the A40 and M4 and A4 and so on. Is that something that's goes into the matrix in terms of deciding which schools are picked, and would that feed in going forward as well?
Yeah, there were a few different factors that informed which schools we worked with, and that was developed with with partners and boroughs, but certainly that will have featured.
Thank you. Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you very much. Richard, the Mayor's got an ambition for swimmable rivers by 2034. but there's a lack of measurable targets. What interim milestones can the GLA share to demonstrate the ambition remains on track at the end of the current mayoral term?
I'm happy to pick this up. Yeah.
Apologies.
Hi. No problem. Hi, Assembly Member. So on the Rivers commitment, as you say, there's a plan underway at the moment to develop this 10-year clean and healthy waterways plan. There was a roundtable earlier this year which really kicked off work with partners to begin the process of bringing that plan together. There are 4 thematic working groups that have fallen out of that roundtable, which are now doing the detailed work on the elements that we expect to see in the plan. So those working groups are across water quality, biodiversity and ecology, access, inclusion and engagement. We are broadly expecting that the plan should be ready to publish early next year. And in terms of what it will include, it will absolutely set out a series of measurable kind of areas and targets, which will demonstrate that progress is being made towards the plan. So, I would fully expect that to include specifics around reduction in water pollution, restoring biodiversity and increasing public access. So that should be a good means of giving us that sense of measurable progress. I think the only other thing that I'd add on that is that the Green Roots Fund, which has launched and is open at the moment, we very much expect that to include specific funding for projects which will contribute to the overall ambition of cleaning up our waterways. So in terms of direct delivery from the GLA, that will be a core part of how we're progressing that commitment, and there'll be all the associated kind of monitoring and tracking of the projects that are funded through that Green Roots Fund.
Thank you. That was really good detail. You slightly triggered me with the roundtable because that's the one I was invited to as the chair of the Environment Committee and then uninvited to. But anyway, let's talk about more important things. Those all sound like good things to be measuring, and obviously we could have a long conversation about exactly what we're measuring, but it's probably not the scope of this meeting. Will there be very direct and specific targets for 2028? So as an assembly, we know by the end of this mayoral term, the mayor said, these are the things I want to hit on quality of water, biodiversity, ecology, access, and we'll be able to measure them as an assembly.
I mean, that's certainly what I'm expecting, and is certainly the intention. I'm not involved in the detail of the drafting of the plan, so I don't know what that's looking like in detail at the moment. But it's very much the intention that we will have these specific areas that we've identified as the areas in which we want to see progress, and I would expect that to have a sense of measurability as well.
Yes, excellent. I've lost my question for a moment. That's all right. So you said areas of measurability. So in terms of actually saying this is a specific target?
As I say, I'm not involved in the detailed drafting of the plan, but I fully expect it to set out those areas and to articulate what progress we're expecting to see. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And final thing is, you said early next year. Anything more specific than that?
I'm afraid not, but broadly speaking, that it's in development at the moment. All of those conversations are going well. And I would absolutely expect it to be published in early next year.
Thank you. Richard, I didn't know if you were waving to come in or you're just stretching. No? Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Waving, stretching, drowning. These are all fine. Assembly Member Hall.
Lovely, thank you. This question's to Jamila, if that's all right with Richard. I don't know if you're allowed to answer this for me. Are you on track to deliver 40,000 EV charging points in London?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, we are on track to deliver that.
Excellent. And how many have we got in place so far?
There are already just over 25,000. I think the precise figure is 26,300.
Lovely, thank you. Have there been any challenges to delivering that?
I don't know if you want to come in more, Richard. But
this is actually one I prepped to answer, but Jam has obviously got the details at her fingertips. So this is looking at a whole range of charging mechanisms, from kind of very local ones on kind of lampposts to the kind of the big kind of service station equivalents. There's been a programme of work. So there is a electric vehicle infrastructure delivery group that TfL convenes, that has got boroughs, private industry and other people on it. That is driving a thing that is called the, forgive the acronyms, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Strategy, or the EVIS. They'll be publishing later this year publishes an annual update of its work that kind of sets this out in detail, and will publish its annual update so far. The challenges really have just been working with the complexity of providers out there in a world in which very few of these are actually built on GLA owned roads, because the nature of London is, as we know, 96% of the roads are owned by the boroughs, is how we can just do that coordination across the kind of complexity of London government. But I think we are making very strong progress on that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad something's going well. That is really good news. Now, we know that the Mayor promised to, and I quote, make London one of the world's greenest cities and be a global leader in tackling the climate crisis. But Sadiq Khan and his team have racked up 473,000 air miles, which, as we know, would take them to the moon and unfortunately bring them back again. It's produced 43.6 tonnes of carbon. And the Deputy Mayor for the Environment has done at least 40,000 trips, or 40,000 miles on trips and holidays. And yet Sadiq Khan is opposed to Heathrow expansion. So how can you square that? I mean, if he's so concerned about the planet and greening things up and everything else, doesn't want expansion of Heathrow, and yet is, whatever one's thoughts on that, anybody that's green will surely think that to rack up that many air miles is excessive.
I mean, again, so this is... I don't want to turn this meeting, with respect, into a kind of greatest hits thing of all kind of political lines about the Mayor. It's about the manifesto, then that doesn't relate to a manifesto commitment. So and I think there's much better asked at MQT, really.
Well, no, you're there to answer questions. You've said that. And you seem to have a list of the questions. You must have, because if not, you wouldn't say we decided who to divvy them out to. And yet, of course, the form is that you're not supposed to have lists of the questions. So that brings that into a question in itself.
Just to clarify that, we do not have a list of the questions. What we do have is a list of the Mayor's manifesto commitments, and we've divvied them out in area between us.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem to have happened for anybody else. But one of his promises is to make London one of the world's greenest cities and be a global leader in tackling the climate crisis. Now, I'm not an expert in climate crisis. I'm sitting next door to somebody that is, and I'm sure that they would say that racking up 473,000 air miles is somewhat excessive.
I mean, again, it's a political comment. I'll prefer the.
Well, you're a political man, so answer it. What do you think that's acceptable?
No, I'm a politically restricted officer of the authority. I really think that's a better question for MQT.
Well, you must have a thought process. Do you think that's acceptable or not?
Again, I'm not. It's not a manifesto commitment. It's not within the scope of this meeting. I think
with
we've reached the end of the road on this
global
one.
leader in tackling the climate crisis. Does the climate crisis not include flying? I mean, the Greens do everything they can in order not to fly, I assume because the flying isn't good for the climate. I've already said to you he's used up, or this 473,000 miles apparently has produced 43.6 tonnes of carbon, which can't be good. I mean, I'm no expert, but it doesn't sound good to me. And our green expert is somewhat agreeing with me. So how do you square that? If he's supposed to be such an environmentalist, why at the drop of the hat does he leap into an aeroplane? Unless he's trying to keep up with Sir Keir Starmer, who also spends more time out of the country. So going back to Sadiq Khan and his manifesto pledges to be the most transparent and green mayor ever, what do you think about 43.6 tonnes of carbon?
I think that's a political point that's really best directed at politicians.
You are a politician, which is why you were put in that position anyway.
No,
Do you not have a view?
Politically restricted officer of the authority.
Are you yet another one of Sadiq Khan's appointments that does not have a view? I've had enough of them this week. Do you not have a view?
I am employed to answer questions, to sit here to answer questions about the manifesto, of which this is not one.
Well, yes, it is. It's about his credibility to be an environmental leader. So you have no answer. That's another manifesto pledge then that's not doing frightfully well, isn't it?
Which actual pledge are you referring to, on numbered wise?
I think you will know that Sadiq Khan says he's going to be the greenest mayor ever. Listen, I trailed around the whole mayoral year and heard nothing but environment this, environment that, and then we see that he's racked at 473,000 with his team.
If you can
miles.
refer me to the numbered commitment, then I'll write to you with an answer.
Oh dear. In other words, everybody, he doesn't have an answer. Yet another manifesto pledge completely obliterated. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There is a little pop-out box in the Mayor's Manifesto, which I helpfully have in front of me, that says, "I'm determined to ensure that London continues to be a global leader in tackling the climate crisis." So I think that's quite a broad statement. It was important enough to have itself in a little box. Just to clarify on your political restriction, which I do recognise, but you didn't seem to find that prevented you earlier using quite a derogatory adjective, which I'm certainly not going to repeat, about the previous government's legacy to the new government. So I'm not going to repeat it for your benefit.
I didn't hear it. What was it?
Which brings us to Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. Back to EV charging, actually, and the 40,000 EV charging points. Now, you mentioned that the boroughs, as well as companies, are involved in a group looking into this. How are you ensuring that all the boroughs are pulling their weight? Anyone who can.
So, in truth, we don't have power in this, but most boroughs are actually extremely keen to do this. And it's a cross-party point. Obstructionism from boroughs is not a problem in this. Actually, it's one of the reasons why this whole area of our work is going well. Is that I think boroughs are keen to step up, and the challenge where there are challenges, we're working our way through them. I tend to be around areas like electricity supply, installation, getting private capacity to do the level of work that's needed. Is not. I haven't come across any particular instances of kind of boroughs being particularly difficult about all of this, I have to say.
Okay, so how can we help them then to unlock some of the barriers? Because what it sounds like you're saying is that there isn't any obstruction or will not to do it. I can only speak for the example that I have. So I obviously represent Brent and Harrow. So in Brent, the local authority itself, so looking at council infrastructure, council roads, have installed 1,100, whereas neighbouring Harrow have installed 78. So that's a difference of 14. Now, the government is extending funding, so I know Harrow have plans to introduce 100, but that will still take it, if you're thinking about boroughs that are installing 4 figures, whereas boroughs that are installing 3 figures, that's a remarkable difference. So how can we make sure that councils are supported to overcome some of those barriers?
So I think that's right. Without getting into commenting on individual council positions I'm not personally familiar with, I think A, we do need boroughs to step up. B, we at TfL have tried to work with boroughs to do that, and see that we have provided LIP funding which boroughs can choose to use for this kind of thing if they want, and boroughs are therefore kind of resourced and supported to do what they need to do, and we would expect them to do this. On what I think is actually, even on this committee, is shown is not a party political issue. We're all in favour of this, and I think we just need to do the work in getting it done. As I say, we are confident, as Jam has said, that this commitment is on track, but it would be more the better.
Thank you. Firstly, an apology. I was remiss earlier. I should have welcomed students from the Azhar Academy Girls' School. Hello, from here in Newham, who join us in the public gallery. And for their benefit and for anyone else who's just tuned in, we're currently putting questions to the Mayor's senior team and GLA officials about the commitments the Mayor made in his manifesto for election last year and how they're being delivered. And the current topic is about making London greener. Before we move on, I have one quick additional question. So one of the commitments that was definitely in the Mayor's manifesto, I can give you page numbers if you like, was that he's continued to be committed to his net zero 2030 target. And in his net zero 2030 plan, there is a requirement to achieve 2.2 million London houses moving to a heat pump, from a gas boiler to a heat pump, which actually is the vast majority of houses in London. Obviously, the target is for that to be done in 5 years, and I estimate at the current rate it will take about 1,700 years. So I just wondered whether you felt that was in your list of things that were going well or badly, and how you might turn that around.
So just looking through. So to be absolutely critical, and just to be clear, and then just to define these things up, the 2030 commitment is a manifesto commitment, and that stands. The pathway to do that wasn't in the manifesto, but it was an advisory thing of which there are tunes you can play on that about what you need to do. However, having clarified that, I think we are all agreed that the provision of zero carbon heat is the trickiest bit of the domestic market to fix, much harder than electricity, where the grid is just decarbonising nationally, built on by what we're doing around community energy generation, a whole range of other things in the TfL, PPA and that kind of thing in London. We are working on kind of range of heat networks and that kind of stuff, and there are conversations going on with very significant private investors around building this, about a much bigger project for heat networks as well. But we're also, the more practical, the more available today solutions are kind of air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and that kind of stuff. And we're also being rolled out at pace. But you are right. I think across the whole country, including London, the provision of heat more than power is a significantly bigger challenge. But there are tunes you can play on a net zero thing where you can offset some of that versus making better progress in other areas.
Rolled out at pace.
Pardon?
Rolled out at pace. That's what you just said.
When
I calculated the pace, we are on track to get there in about 1,700
So forgive me if I misspoke. I think there were I thought I said there were challenges to rolling out at pace, but certainly if not. I think we are clear that net zero in the power system is happening quicker and easier than net zero in the heating system. I think we've always known that. I think that's not just a London problem, it's a UK problem, frankly. It's a Europe problem as well. And we are working, what I did say we were working at pace, and we're working at pace to try and identify kind of solutions at scale, which is both, a range of incentivising new builds with kind of heat pumps, not gas boilers, and a whole range of other things like that. But it's also, I think we are, looking at how we can leverage in what would be billions and billions of private investment to start looking at kind of more scaled solutions. And we're working both through Opportunity London, which has got a kind of trial scheme in South Islington in its investment prospectus, working with companies about scale-ups of that kind of heat network provision as well, and trying to build an economic case, because the reality is this is going to have to work as a commercial proposition, because it's beyond the scale of the GLA to fund.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up on this, so that takes us on to our next section, which is making Londoners more prosperous, perhaps than they can afford their own heat pumps. We start with Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start off by talking about free school meals, which obviously are popular amongst schools and parents and children themselves. But Richard, I'm going to come to you. The Mayor has promised to keep the free school meals programme and that it will continue throughout this term. But there are concerns that the money provided per meal is not enough. Is this going to be addressed?
So the Mayor has made clear that the universal free school meals is going to carry on for the entirety of his period as Mayor, and that we set out the funding programme for that last year. That is still on track, so that is secure. On the rate per meal, so we have looked at that. Basically, we will assess each year where we think we stand. A number of factors come into that, and what we pay remains robustly ahead of what national government pays for the free school meals it funds. But we do that on an evidence base, and so we will assess the evidence each year. And that's two things. That's both the rate per meal, but also the assumed take-up rate, because for administrative ease, we kind of assume every school at the moment has an 87% take-up rate, which is based on like 3 years of evidence of this now. And schools, if they get a higher take-up rate than that, which a small number do, not that many, then they can effectively come back, through their local authority, recoup the money back from us.
Faye, coming to you, have you costed any potential increase in the amount paid per meal?
As part of the sort of budget cycle, we'll be looking to ensure that we've got sufficient resources to continue to honour the commitment. So that will just feed into our dual processes. And we have already got some early workings on that, including things like Richard's explained, where we want to give additional money for children perhaps with SEN, all those kind of things. Those workings are currently underway.
Okay, so if there was to be an increase in the cost, are you confident that that would be covered?
Yeah, that would be managed through any budget process. And as I say, we'll continue to take kind of evidence-based decisions on this.
Fine. And as you noted, thankfully, City Hall did provide an uplift to children with special educational needs in certain circumstances, and to kosher-free school meals, which continues to be welcomed in my constituency. I'm also just wondering, Richard, the impact of the government's extension of free school meals to families receiving universal credit. What impact does that have on the Mayor's programme?
Well, it means that a number, potentially quite a significant more number of people will be funded by the government instead of the Mayor. The Mayor has been very clear. His policy has always been to effectively top up everyone in primary school who isn't already funded by the national position. And the Mayor has strongly welcomed this announcement by the government. It shows he believes the success of this London initiative and that it's been picked up more widely. But we haven't yet modelled the financial impact of that on the GLA, but we will have done that in time for the GLA budget process.
Okay. And I'm going to move on to fares freeze and the promise of fares freeze. And the Mayor has set out that he would continue to freeze fares for as long as economic conditions allow. Are current economic conditions pointing towards a fares freeze from March 26?
Well, the Mayor will make his fares decision in due course in the normal way. And I'm not going to preempt that. Obviously, that's tied into the TfL budget planning cycle that we have set out. Work on where TfL fare levels will be is ongoing.
Right. So when would you expect that to be?
Forgive me. So Faye, I don't know if that comes in the group budget process or in an MD around that, but it would. The Mayor's annual fares decision will be made in the usual timescale. Okay,
fine. So we finally have a long-term settlement from government for TfL, which is very welcome and helps TfL plan. But the funding settlement it assumes that we'll have a scenario that the overall TfL fares will rise by the value of RPI plus 1. Can you confirm that the RPI plus 1% increase is for business planning purposes, has always been the assumption that TfL uses, and it's not a requirement?
To be frank, I can't, because I don't have that level of detail in front of me, but either Seb or I can get back to you on that.
That's fine. I'll write to Seb. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Richard, the Mayor has produced a London growth plan, and it aims to create 150,000 good jobs by 2028. How is this being monitored, and how will success be measured and reported?
So the growth plan, I think, was groundbreaking, not least because it wasn't just the Mayor who did it. It was every London borough signed up to it, and along with business groups, trade unions, higher education sector and stuff. I've rarely known, in fact, I don't think I've ever known, and I've been around a bit, I'm afraid, a document with that level of kind of consensus behind it across across London government. And I think enormous credit is due to Howard Dorber, to London councils, and to Laura Citron at LNP for the work they have done on that. In answer to your question, officers are currently working on the development of a kind of framework and the implementation of the one-year actions that were clearly set out in the growth plan. So kind of measurement criteria will come back as part of that work. Howard, I'm sure, will be able to report back on it.
Thank you. I think my problem with all these waste of time strategies is that, you know, politicians once again think they create jobs. No. It's the private sector that creates jobs. So perhaps would a better approach of monitoring be that if the London Growth Plan was successful, and there's some stuff in there, I think, which is the tech corridor, which I think does probably have good cross-party support in the GLA, and say we have helped facilitate the creation of 150,000 jobs rather than we have created 150,000 jobs.
I think the precise wording of our, I tend to agree with you actually, which is that I think the precise wording of our manifesto actually says we will help create 150,000 new jobs. So you and I had a kind of meeting of minds on GLA strategies last week, and I don't want to embarrass you by agreeing with you more. But I do agree with you.
You've just ruined my career now.
Well, at least you have a career to ruin. Well, I am merely a functionary. I think so the point of the growth plan actually isn't that it is a traditional local authority strategy that sits on a shelf. It's actually there are both a bunch of concrete actions which you will be able to measure how much we have performed against them that come in it. I think that's not an unreasonable expectation. But also I think there is genuine value in a city with a governance as complex as London as getting real alignment around both what are sectoral priorities and geographical priorities for growth, because it does require the GLA, borough planning committees, sub-regional partnerships and all that kind of, all the machinery of government, including government itself, to work together and actually having some sort of broad, significantly greater developed consensus within London around where we will get growth, the kind of sectors we need to invest in, the kind of ways in which we need to link together our skills money with our, economic development stuff, I think is of genuine value. And frankly, I wouldn't have signed the money to do it off if I thought it was going to be another boring economic development plan. What matters now is driven by the London Partnership Board's growth mission, where Laura Citron as mission lead, working with Howard and Claire Holland and others, actually now need to make sure that those actions are implemented for the first year, and we actually start to make some investment decisions. I do think, for example, the session we were at yesterday with Opportunity London, where London has now developed the most significant independently government FDI investment attraction mechanism in the country, where we are now actively selling London on the world stage in the way that we just weren't joined up enough to do a few years ago. It's actions like that actually make a very real difference in the amount of private sector money creating jobs in the city that we're now seeing benefits from.
Yeah, I just, this is more of a comment than a question, I just think the point, because London and Partners is a very good example of this. We've created £50 trillion worth of revenue for London, or whatever nonsense they spin. My point is, and I think you've addressed it well in the wording of the Mayor's manifesto, it's all about the facilitation point. No one can claim credit for any of this stuff. It is purely, we have created the economic environment. Transport is a very good example of that. Elizabeth line, whatever. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. But a new line is a good thing, and it has generated revenue for the city. And so my point is, I think just in future, and I know you're conscious of this, and you've acknowledged it already, I think the point facilitation, rather than we will create X, Y, Z, would be more helpful. And equally, not make the mayor a hostage to fortune, politically.
I take the point. I think the role of government in this is to create the conditions for investment to thrive, as well as actually do the necessary around back to work stuff, around low level skills and stuff like that, to ensure all Londoners get the benefit of growth when it occurs, so it doesn't further exacerbate inequalities. So I think there is a vital and critical role for the state in this, but semantically, then we'll obviously reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. We now go over to Assemblymember Mahfouz.
Thank you. And it's very, very clear at the moment that many people feel that they've been left behind after a decade and a half of underinvestment in our public services, challenges with the labour market that have fallen upon people that are having to face right now. One of those groups that are challenged and the manifesto seeks to support is low-income and unemployed Londoners who are under the age of 19. In the manifesto, we've got a commitment to provide free skills training for those individuals. How is that currently being implemented?
So the skills training to unemployed and low-income Londoners actually is for people over the age of 19, because under the age of 19 it's still a national commitment under the DFE, but actually that's going well. I mean, adult skills funding, I think the GLA, the delegation of that funding has done a really good job in using that funding with kind of as much freedom as we can within the very limited rules, where what we are now seeing is that being deployed through things like the Free Courses for Jobs Fund, as well as adult skills funding, and that, so in practical terms, that manifesto commitment is due. We are confident that that will continue to be met as it is at the moment. What we want to do, though, and I think we are making genuine progress on this now in a way that's quite heartening, is take our skills work beyond just like the competent handling of government funding and government rules. And while we are publishing what we're terming the inclusive talent strategy, is a talent pipeline plan for London for every bit of the labour market, both helping ordinary Londoners into jobs, as well as attracting the kind of global talent that London needs, as well as kind of growing our own talent as a city, is now like the first time we will have that kind of citywide talent strategy that the GLA is working again with kind of core partners in the growth mission to develop.
So we used to get European Social Fund for this, then it became the UK SPF once we'd Brexited. That's going to be moving to an integrated settlement. How are we going to ensure that we make sure that we're continuing to invest and reduce the numbers of young people who are not in employment, education and training?
Well, most of the it's a technical point, but it is true. Most of the funding for this doesn't come through UK SPF. It comes through the Adult Skills Fund and the Free Courses for Jobs grant that we get from the government. As it moves into an integrated settlement, clearly whatever funding there is in that, and we are still in a position where we don't know, and the late budget date doesn't give us any great confidence we're going to find out earlier, not later, which is a source of cross-party frustration, I'm sure. But we will be very clear, I think, what monies we go into that pot and then how that is allocated. So the Assembly will, because of the negotiation we've put in, that the Assembly will be the organisation that will formally have powers to hold us to account for those decision-making, and clearly will then be transparent about how those decisions are made. What we don't know yet is what funds will go into that integrated settlement, because that's still in the context of being negotiated.
Thanks. Faye, just over to yourself. So TfL are introducing the Bakerloop 1, the Superloop 11, Superloop 12 routes. They're currently consulting on the Superloop 13, which three of us on this side of the chamber are very excited about, because it runs through all three of our boroughs. So best part of London. But we're not neglecting the other parts. There are also Superloop 14 and 15 on the cards already, and I think there was a press release earlier today in terms of indicating which parts of London they will be running through. Can you confirm that the funding to run these routes has therefore been found by TfL?
So for Phase A, that's fully budgeted for, but for Phase B, and I would need to check exactly which routes are in which, but I'm assuming that's 14 and 15 maybe are in the later phases. That's still going to be part of the business planning process that we articulated earlier on, would come back here through the normal budget cycle. And
as we move to longer settlements, and obviously now there is a longer term settlement for TfL in particular, can we got longer term certainty over whether it's Phase B, C or whatever letters we want to get to in terms of rollout of the Superloop, because it was a key commitment?
I'm sure that's the intention of TfL to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the advantage of the first time in years getting a multi-year settlement is it does allow us to do multi-year planning, and that will set that out clearly.
Okay. Is that something that you can share with the committee at the earliest possible opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the TfL business plan is clearly, forgive me, I don't know if that's this committee, because it will clearly come out part of the budget, which is this committee, or how much of that will also get separately scrutinised by the Transport Committee. But the TfL business plan and its mayoral submission is clearly ripe for scrutiny.
But we haven't got a countdown to say when it's going to appear at the committee there. No, okay, thanks.
I think that's just, I mean, the budget process, I'm sure, just being worked out between clerks in the usual way.
I'm sure we look forward to receiving it. Yeah, as you say, but we look at it quite closely, and the Transport Committee look at it quite closely as well, often in slightly different ways. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Just sticking with transport, it's the what progress has the Mayor made in discussions with government on rail devolution?
So we think we are making some progress on this, and I think there's some further distance to go on it, but we are feeling confident about this one at the moment. I think TfL's track record of taking over previously nationally run services is exemplary. I'm old enough to remember the old Silver Link and just how much worse that was than the the London Overground services. London Overground is clearly a massive step up, and actually, some of this does lead back to the housing point and the infrastructure point that we were talking about earlier, in order to build out significant numbers of the new areas of London that we would need to densify in London to hit the housing numbers that all of us want, will require better transport infrastructure. And frankly, that's easier to coordinate significantly if those services are run and controlled from London, not a desk in the Department of Transport somewhere. So we are confident we are furthest engaged in discussions around Great Northern. I think there's a business planning process that the TfL are working through with the Department for Transport at the moment. And so, we are actively lobbying and campaigning for this, and we are doing the necessary officer work in partnership with the civil service at the same time.
Thank you. One question which I have relating to rail devolution is that it's often more expensive to travel by rail than it is on other areas of the London Transport Network. And at a Mayor's question time, either earlier this year or late last year, I asked him whether there would be parity of pricing, that it would be no more expensive to travel on devolved rail as part of the London Transport Network than it would be on any other part. Is the Mayor still, and the Mayor gave me an assurance that that was his intention, is the Mayor still committed to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be in deep trouble if I contradicted the boss, I'm sure. But the
facts change, Richard.
So the Mayor's fair decision we made in the proper way, and forgive me, I'm not quite clear what you're asking for. What the commitment to parity.
So it will cost no more to travel on devolved rail than it would on any other part of the network.
Yeah, and look, I think TfL's track record of keeping fares under national fares is pretty clear, and I'm certainly not going to land myself in hot water by contradicting the boss.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just going to say I haven't seen any indications, but a sudden burst of indication from Assemblymember Mahfouz.
So for residents in my patch between Greenford and West Ealing, we've currently got a route that is still run by Great West Rail, but serves wholly within London. Do you envisage at the moment, with the conversations that have been happening, that residents along that stretch would benefit from that being transferred over to TfL and seeing the sort of transformative changes that we've seen with Overground being rolled out to wholly services that are currently running just within London?
So we are robustly confident that if those services were to transfer to TfL, they would be run better. However, what is tricky about all of this is how you take individual routes on individual lines out from a very big network that becomes, for technical reasons that men who've played with train sets their entire life know a lot more about than me, is incredibly technically complex to do. So it's impossible, as I understand it, to separate individual lines, or actually the servicing of individual lines, out from the broader network of kind of network, Great West network, South East network, Southern Southern, etc., which is why we first wanted to look at Great Northern, because it is, it is a significantly simpler carve-out from the rest of the network. The other thing, of course, that plays into all of this is obviously as individual franchises end and as the government creates GB Rail, they've made a commitment to all mayors that they will have a key role in making service decisions in their area. I think that's that will be a very, very significant improvement for even the ones that TfL doesn't have direct control of, for London Government's ability to direct rail services, where we have very little ability in the current privatised TOC system. And so, even for the lines that TfL doesn't directly control, mayors will have significant, future mayors will have significantly greater say in how those are operated. So, for example, of another line that, would be superficially attractive to the GLA, but becomes impossible to carve out of the Greater West Anglia Great Northern network. I was telling the story to an Assembly member in the break, where on our way to the PQT in Tottenham, David B and I got the train from Stratford to Northumberland Park. That route finishes in Meridian Water. It's a wholly within Greater London route. It would make perfect. Frankly, it was under-marketed, it was undersold, it was sent from and the train was a quarter it was only a quarter full at 6 p.m. at night, and it's a massive waste of resource. If that was part of the TfL network, it would be better. It's impossible to pull that individual route out from the wider network, so it can't be taken over. But frankly, having but given Meridian Water is a key housing site, we need significantly better transport access there. We want to work to improve connections into Tottenham as well. That it's exactly the kind of thing where we need much greater say, even if it's short of full control over how those routes operate, because there's a massive wasted opportunity as it stands.
Thanks. Assembly Member Clark.
Yeah, it would just be remiss of me to be on this topic and not also broach the Thameslink, which is late, cancelled, often not running, and I get many complaints from everywhere from Mill Hill to West Hampstead and further down the line. I have asked the Mayor in the past, and his view was very much that everything would be better if it was run by TfL, which I agree with, and also we'd be getting those receipts as well. I seem to give me a similar answer, but I do think where we have, it's a major connection into King's Cross from, across London, but across my constituency as well. And it seems that turning that into, we could have similar success that we had with the London Overground, should that service be controlled by TfL. I do know that is one of the contracts that does run out next year. Is there any way to have any influence over Thameslink?
So there are ways to have influence, but I think the honest position on Thameslink itself is so much of that line operates outside London, because it runs from Bedford to Brighton, that I think it's quite difficult to make. We haven't prioritised making the case to government to take control of that line, because it really is a kind of cross-country facility. So, but I think given the commitments the government have made around how GB Rail will operate, the role of mayors in GB Rail, again, it feels to me the kind of thing that we can have significantly greater control of in the new arrangements than we would be able to, than we do have at the moment, even if that's to say, for a route like Thameslink, which is extremely complicated and extensive, would operate, even if we can't have kind of direct control over it at the moment.
Assembly Member Roberts. It's like buses here, isn't it?
Well, just as all of the constituency members start vying for their own patch, could I just check that South Western Rail, the Hounslow Loop and the Shepperton Branch line are also under consideration?
As I say, they're certainly under consideration from our point of view. We are robustly confident about TfL's ability to run these lines well and improve the quality of service for residents. We are getting into territory here that is at the edge of my knowledge, given the complexity of it. However, we are, that is another one I understand from the experts is quite complex to pull out from a wider network. But we are working these things through. As I say, the first kind of test case for this is Great Northern.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So final question on rail devolution then. So over the last few years, we've had, let's say, quite a political answer from the Mayor about why the government isn't interested in doing it, which allowed him to play his favourite game of it's all the Conservative government's fault. Obviously, we now have a new government, and my perception is that they're no more interested in devolving rail to the mayor, these lines, than the previous government, and we haven't seen any movement. We've seen conversations, which is distinct from action. So it seems to me there's an underlying problem that governments just don't seem very interested in giving the mayor any more railway lines.
So I don't think, to be fair, I don't think that is an accurate statement of events around Great Northern, where there are active conversations. TfL is preparing a business case for submission. It's not a done deal, but it's not an active conversation. It is a lot of work going into for us to make that case. On the other stuff, as I say, it comes down to what is initially taken into GBR, what the future arrangements down the line are for that, and the role that the mayor has in supervising GBR, Great British Rail services across London. So wherever we're going to be on all of this, there will be significantly greater mayoral both control and influence on the rail system than we currently enjoy.
Okay. And what's the timetable, if you forgive me, for the
I think the conversations around GBR around Great Northern are carrying on for next bit of this year and probably for the early bit of next. On the wider GBR thing, I'm afraid I don't know, and that's really a matter for Parliament.
Okay. I think that's it then for this section. That takes us on to our final bit, which is mayoral mandates and delivery plans, where we are kicking off with Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you. Are there any manifesto commitments you consider no longer likely to be deliverable? And if so, how is this being communicated with Londoners?
Only got half an hour left.
I think the only one we would put in that camp is the police office front counters, where I think there's been quite a lot of communication with Londoners about that, but that's the only one at the moment we think is in, we'd be willing to categorise in that position.
So to flip that round, you still believe that every manifesto commitment is still likely to be deliverable?
So I think I stand by the language we used at the beginning of this session. There is 20 done. We're very confident about the vast majority of the rest of them. A couple of them are dependent on an external funding that we can't make guarantees around, and there's one we think at the moment where the mayor's made his position clear on it, but isn't going to be met.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. So, Faye, what's the process for incorporating the mayoral mandates, which, for the people watching this who perhaps haven't followed it as closely as we have, this is the process by which the mayor's manifesto becomes, a policy programme within the GLA. What's the process for incorporating those into the financial planning, and are there challenges aligning budgets with the priorities set out in the delivery plans?
So that's what happens in terms of the process. As you'll have seen, the delivery plans, the 8 that have been agreed. As each of those are agreed, they're reflected already within the... Actually, perhaps I better start right back at the beginning. So in March of this year, we allocated out for each GLA delivery plan a budget. And as each of those delivery plans have progressed to agreement, we've then repeated that budget and those resources in those delivery plans where, say, for example, something's moved. So, say, for example, you might have assumed a particular type of expenditure was part of a different delivery plan. It's moved to a new part of the delivery plan. All of that's clearly set out in those delivery plans that are published for those 8. As we get progress for the GLA, the other 14 will be published to get to the end of that process. Published, I think we've said end of October. So we'll then have a clear view of all of those plans, and they cover 3 years, not just 1 year. Then they'll be integrated into the GLA's budget process, the normal sort of budget cycle.
Okay. Can I check why it's taken so long from the election, which obviously is now, somewhat more than a year ago, 14, 15 months ago? By the time all of that's published, by this autumn, it'll be getting on for 18 months, which is if you take out the fact that the 4th year of the mayoral term, the ability to deliver things peters out as that year wears on and the election looms. We're substantially through the mayoral term before all this is published. Why is it taking quite so long to get it out there for people to see? Or perhaps I should use the future tense because it's not there yet. Why are you forecasting that even if you hit your forecast, it will take so long to get it all out there?
Okay, so obviously, as I repeated, we did set out a budget envelope for each of those delivery plans back in March. I think we discussed that at a previous committee in terms of some of the challenges we've had in reorientating the organisation around this new way of working. Each of those delivery plans are not just setting out resources, they're setting out detail of what's been delivered, but also success measures to measure them against. So it's not just a resourcing question, it's also sort of setting out those ambitions and success measures as well. So that process has taken longer than I think the organisation would have liked to, and we did talk about that, I think, last week in the Oversight Committee. But that hasn't stopped progress, as Jam spoke about earlier on in the process. We're still monitoring and still delivering progress of those delivery plans.
Okay, well, I suppose we'll look forward to the October with bated breath. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. I mean, I think I just disagree with you, Assembly Member Garrett. Lots of unexpected sighs there. But I think in 20 years as a council, I think a lot delivery happens in the last year of a 4-year term, because actually you've been working for 3 years in order to achieve that. So, but in terms of, obviously, Richard, Faye, you were both at the Oversight Committee last week answering questions around the mandates, and clearly turning those mandates into performance reports. We heard from you that you're going to be producing quarterly monitoring reports. So just if you could let us know, when will you expect to be able to start sharing those with us as Assembly members? When will they be available?
So the first quarterly performance report of the 8 delivery plans that have been agreed will be published at Q2. So I think the timeline for that, I should have these things at the top of my head, but I haven't got them, but I can give you the timeline for that. But it's the normal quarterly routine process that we publish quarterly, and the 8 delivery plans that have been agreed will be part of that process.
And in addition to that, you need to produce 6 monthly reports in relation to integrated settlements that we will need to scrutinise as well. How are those two aligned?
So it's really important for us as an organisation to make sure those processes are efficient, so you don't have kind of like a complex delivery or governance process. So we are intending to integrate those processes, that you press a button and you have both of those sets of information together. So we will need to do that every 6 months, but that starts from next financial year.
So if you're going to be integrating those, and hopefully just a push of a button, fingers crossed, all the rest of it, but if it's going to be that straightforward and you're producing quarterly monitoring reports, could we therefore expect interim reports from an integrated settlement point of view? So we would be seeing those every 3 months rather than every 6 months?
I think that certainly would be the ambition for us to pull that in together as well. I'm not sure yet. Obviously, so this is a sort of whole system operational process that we're going through behind the scenes at the moment to make this work, but I don't think that seems like a reasonable achievement objective to work towards.
Thank you.
Thanks. And a final question, I think a technical question from me that's been flagged up by our team, the scrutiny team here at the Assembly, which is that it appears that with these quarterly monitoring reports that they might now be based on a 13-period, 4 weeks, 13-period year rather than a traditional 12-month year. And if that is the case, obviously that does create 2 problems. One is you can't then have 4 even quarters, and 2 is you can't have backwards comparability with previous quarters and previous periods. Is that correct that the GLA reporting is switched to 13 periods?
That, in terms of the financial ledger system, that's been in place, I think, well, it's certainly been in place since I've been here, so I'm not sure when that change happened. And the way that we deal with it in terms of the finance team, obviously, is I think you see the reports, we describe them as periods rather than quarters, which references as in 4-week periods. And I think one of the ways that, in terms of budget reporting particularly, is you have the forecast at the end of the year, which actually is the prime information, which will always be 52 weeks. So that's how we handle it internally. So this has been in place, and we've been managing this situation for a while, I think, before I came here.
So, Matt's question, how many 4-week periods are in a quarter? Bearing in mind 13 is a prime number.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and check in terms of which quarterly point we put, in terms, I can give you the exact, at what point does the period end and what point does that quarter process end, because we've obviously got a financial cycle on that process. So I can provide that cyclical information that helps you.
I think, well, I think, cut to the chase, I think our concern is that we would really like to just see monthly reporting. How the GLA wants to operate internally is entirely up to it, but for example, the Affordable Housing Programme, which we also look at, that's published by calendar month, not by lunar month or period, as people might call it. And it just creates a confusing mess. You can't compare periods because you can't compare months and these 4-week periods because they're different. You can't compare the quarters because you can't have 4 equal-sized quarters in a year with 13 periods in it. And you can't compare whatever those quarters are with similar quarters in previous years because those previous years were published based on a 12-month. The quarterly monitoring reports were based on 4 quarters of 3 months, which works. So my request is that however you wish to work internally, could you continue to publish data based on 12-month, a year of 12 months with 4 quarters with 3 months in each quarter?
Our financial ledger system is linked to TfL, who report on this structure as well. And so my understanding, I would have need to go back and check, but understanding is that would not be possible for us to do that because that is how the timetable works. But obviously what we do from a financial point of view is ensure that each year is accurate representation of a year's worth of expenditure in the way that we accrue and make year-end adjustments to work through that.
Okay, I think Assemblymember Mahfouz, so just to finish off, you come in on this as well. Yeah, Assemblymember Mahfouz.
Yeah, I think just to clarify though, Faye, so clearly the financial monitoring is linked to 13 periods over the year and that's linked to pay, etc. I think it's probably aligned with TfL systems because when they came in before you started, and you've obviously been operating that since you came into the role. And that's slightly separate, but not entirely separate from the point of view of the monitoring report. So the monitoring reports from the point of view of outcomes and outputs in relation to the conversation that we've had all of this morning, will that still be in monthly and quarterly and 6-monthly periods, or is that linked to the 13 periods that have been referred to by Assemblymember Garrett?
I think that's kind of a complex question in that it depends on that particular performance indicator because an indicator might, depends on what the data is behind that indicator. For example, if we're using TfL, like financial data, that comes from that ledger system, but if we were using, I don't know, like external data, and I can't think of something off the top of my head, and housing number, then that would be the latest accurate data that we would have. So that particular 13-month thing is particularly related to our financial information. It's not a general way that we work as an organisation. It will depend on that. But obviously, each time our intention, they will be, we'll be ensuring that they'll be able to be a like-for-like comparative because that process would have been in place before. And obviously, we haven't published recently the new delivery plan processes. It would be absolutely my intention to ensure that they're comparable between periods, and if that wasn't, I would make sure that was clearly stated the reason or an equivalent.
So because you're saying in terms of pushing that button, clearly you have to specify what that button produces at the end of it. So at this point, we can still set out and scope what that looks like. So I think the clear point from us as the performance monitoring committee is that we need to be able to see that on a monthly and quarterly and therefore 6-monthly basis. And so the periods that are being reported when you hit that button should reflect that when you're producing that data. Clearly the financial element of that monitoring might sit slightly differently, and clearly it's incredibly important. But the most important thing in terms of the output and outcome numbers in relation to what we're expecting to see would be as we would expect.
I've heard that, Mr. That's fine, and I'm sure that'll happen.
Okay, thanks. I think perhaps it might be something that can be more helpfully set out in a letter, because I think there are some specific concerns, specific monitors, and you appreciate the problem that if all these things are happening on different periods, it just becomes impossible to compare things and understand what's going on. Even to the enlightened observer that tune into the Budget and Performance Committee. Okay, I don't see any more indications, so I think that brings this morning's meeting to a close. So if I could thank our 3 guests for attending today and for your answers to our questions. Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? And can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Good. Can I ask the committee to note the quarterly monitoring reports? And can we note the committee's work programme and its dates? Good, well done, well noted. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 21st of October 2025 at 10 a.m. in the chamber here at City Hall. I have no further business this morning, so that concludes this morning's meeting. Thanks, everyone.